One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 21-40. Chapter 21 College Dao Strength Assessment. 1 year, especially at Zhang Yang's current age, often changes the most. Compared with a year ago, Zhang Yang looks more mature now. Although he is only 13 years old, he looks about the age of a boy of 14 or 5 years old, and an adult in his 20s. Human psychology makes Zhang Yang look like he doesn't have the immature aura of his peers. Due to more than a year of exercise, his body has become incomparably strong, and he has a handsome face. He can be regarded as a beautiful man. However, this is only a superficial change. An internal change, it is even bigger. During the year, Zhang Yang was not just exercising his body. He also did not lose the 4 basic abilities of Reiatsu and Death. He practiced unremittingly every day, and now he has reached Reiatsu alone. The level of the chairperson, although it is said to be an ordinary low-ranking chairperson, but don't forget that Zhang Yang and the chief captain have accumulated thousands of years of slashing fists and walking ghosts. Plus these, now Zhang Yang does not know the level of his own strength. But only one thing is certain, that is, the strength of Zhang Yang now is absolutely different from a year ago. In addition, in the past year, nothing major happened in the academy. The training that should be trained, the food and sleep that should be eaten and sleep, at most, everyone in the academy is used to Zhang Yang always training on the playground alone. The academy instructor that Zhang Yang does not make trouble is the one who already knows Zhang Yang. As for what happened outside, that's not what Zhang Yang knew. The effect of training recently doesn't seem to be very big. Would you like to find Zephyr to plan some new training? Carrying the barbell and jumping with the frog, Zhang Yang glanced at the freshmen who were arranging for the test subfloor, and muttered in his heart. Zephyr arranged for him a year ago, and now he can easily complete it. He also tried to increase the training intensity, but it seems that the effect is not as obvious as before, so he wondered whether to let Zephyr arrange for him again. Let's train. After another lap, Zhang Yang threw the barbell, sat down under the shade of the big tree beside the playground, wiped his sweat, took a few sips of water from the water bottle beside him, and watched the freshmen who were taking the test. Couldn't help but smile, and remembered the scene when he first came in. Time flies so fast. With a sigh, Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then shook his head. When did he become so literary? It really hurts. After muttering something funny, Zhang Yang walked towards the teaching building, and the man in black who was watching the elevator saw Zhang Yang, as if he had already gotten used to it. Before Zhang Yang could speak, he opened the elevator door and let Zhang Yang go in. Soon, the elevator stopped on the 5th floor. However, as soon as the elevator door opened, Zhang Yang couldn't help but be stunned. He saw that in the large classroom, everyone was fighting with their bare hands. All kinds of screams and shouts continued to sound, which seemed to be lively. Extraordinary. Whoosh. Suddenly, a black shadow flew towards Zhang Yang. Without any hesitation, Zhang Yang kicked out without any hesitation. Ouch! With a scream, the figure was directly kicked to the ground by Zhang Yang, and he got up in embarrassment, staring at Zhang Yang and shouting, "Zhang Yang, you bastard, see the person clearly before kicking." "It's me, Bastille." "Well, I know it's you." Zhang Yang looked like I knew it for a long time, and glanced at Tina, who was also embarrassed in the crowd, but still drinking and fighting, and said strangely, "What is this doing?" "What else can I do? Fight melee. Those bastards are so heavy." Bastille scolded lowly, rubbing his sore waist. Compared to a year ago, he looked much more mature. Melee. Zhang Yang looked at the crowd, who were all mercilessly attacking the surrounding people. Tina's situation was not very good. After all, her strength was not that great on the 5th floor, especially when she could only use in the case of fists. But fortunately, since I can only use fists and feet, although it hurts when I get hit, it is only a small injury, and it is harmless. The teacher came over here. Don't say anything, Grandma is a jerk, I'm going to take revenge. Bastille shrank his neck suddenly, then shouted loudly, and rushed in again. Zhang Yang looked aside and saw Zephyr walking towards him. What's the matter? Is something wrong? Zephyr asked Zhang Yang while watching the state of the melee. In the past year, there is no sense of monitoring and testing in the past. As the two keep getting along with each other, the relationship between the two has improved a lot, and it is a bit like a teacher and a friend. This made Bastille and the others very surprised. After all, what they feared most was Zephyr. However, Zephyr's attitude towards Zhang Yang was completely different from that of them, but they were surprised, but they were still very self-aware. Other floors didn't know, but most people on the 5th floor know that Zhang Yang is very strong, and the strong are treated like the strong, which they cannot envy. Now Zhang Yang, although not many people on other floors know about it, but on the 5th floor, he is indeed the first person. Although, there are still a few people who refuse to agree. Yeah, recently, I feel that the training effect is not very good. Would you like to arrange a new training plan for me? Zhang Yang looked at Zephyr and said. Hearing this, Zephyr turned his head to look at Zhang Yang, did not answer, but shook his head and said, I really can't understand you more and more. Everyone else is here to learn various combat skills and experience, but you are good, nothing but exercise. Quote. It varies from person to person, it varies from person to person. Zhang Yang scratched his head and smiled, he can't say that I have the memory of the commander-in-chief, so I don't need to learn Marine's combat skills at all. Looking at Zhang Yang, who didn't seem to want to explain anything, Zephyr didn't ask any more, but pondered for a while, and continued. Physical training is not always unlimited. Physical condition, training intensity, and age, all of which are in connection with your current age, exercising to this level is already the limit, and if you continue, you will only exceed the load on your body and cause irreparable damage to your body. Quote. You mean, I don't need to continue exercising now, but let the body grow slowly through the excess of time? Zhang Yang said with a frown. Almost. Zephyr nodded and said, to be honest, in my opinion, instead of staying in the Marine Academy, you might as well go out and practice. There are many strong people in the ocean, no matter how talented people are. It can only be used as a decoration. If you can go out to experience, your strength will definitely grow faster than staying here now. Quote. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, and then moved a little bit. To be honest, he also yearns for the outside world, but because of his lack of strength, he chose to join Marine to grow steadily. Although his strength is not that strong, he is enough to protect himself. What's more, in a certain aspect, the god of death needs to fight to become stronger. As Zephyr said, if he can go out and experience, his strength may really increase even more. I'll think about it. Zhang Yang thought for a while. Well, just think about it for yourself, and take a good rest for a while now. Zephyr nodded, then thought of something, and said to Zhang Yang, by the way, don't forget to gather at the playground in the afternoon. You are also a student on the 5th floor, and you will also participate in this year's Academy Taoism assessment. Academy Tao Strength Assessment. Zhang Yang was stunned for a while. Chapter 22 is underestimated. The scorching sun was in the sky, and the scorching sun was baking the earth. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on the playground of Marine Academy, a large group of boys and girls stood upright in the sunlight, and sweat slowly appeared on their slightly immature faces, but not only did no one express dissatisfaction, the complaining sound, but they can still see the look of anticipation in their eyes, just because now is the time for the Academy's Taoism assessment. The College Tao Strength Assessment is an assessment test conducted by Marine College from time to time. It tests the students' Tao strength value. Those whose Tao strength is higher than the current floor can be promoted to a higher floor and get a better learning environment. For those students on the lower floors, this is an excellent opportunity for them to ascend to the higher floors. However, some people are happy and some are worried. After all, if the Tao strength is too low, they will be lowered to the floor or even sent to the Marine Academy of other branches. This is the Marine Academy, which cultivates only elites and no waste. Of course, in addition to the Tao strength assessment, in order to make the students more competitive, the high-level students also allow the lower-level students to challenge the higher-level students. If they can win, even if the Dow strength value is not enough, they can also be promoted to higher floors. Interesting, survival of the fittest, this is a bit like Marine Academy. On the far left of the playground, among the students on the 5th floor, Zhang Yang listened to Bastille's explanation of the Academy's Dow assessment, and looked at the students on the other floors with interest. Interesting is fun, but for some people it's a nightmare. Bastille raised an eyebrow. At this time, Zephyr and other generals who acted as instructors also came to the playground and stood in front of the queue of 500 or 600 people. Zephyr Admiral, it's almost time to start, a colonel said to Zephyr. Zephyr nodded, his sharp eyes swept over all the students, and after a pause on Zhang Yang's body, Vivi said solemnly, the Dow strength test starts now, show your training results this year, from the 1st floor. The students begin, and those whose names are called come out to accept the assessment. Quote. Saying that, Zephyr stepped aside, while Colonel Marine took a form out of his pocket, looked at it and shouted, Sadie. Yes. A shy boy walked out nervously. Attack him with all your strength, any part, don't worry about him getting hurt. The colonel pointed at the expressionless man in black beside him. Understood. The shy boy glanced at the black-clothed man, took a deep breath nervously, clenched his fists, and punched the black-clothed man in the abdomen. Bang! With a muffled sound, the black-clothed man remained motionless and said expressionlessly, 37 Dow power. Yes, you can go to the 2nd floor. The colonel nodded with satisfaction, and immediately made the shy boy overjoyed and returned to the team excitedly. The other students who saw this scene immediately clenched their fists and said to themselves, I must play well, and I will also go to a higher level to learn. Carvin, the colonel continued. Yes. A somewhat thin teenager walked out, hesitated and said, report to the instructor, can you use weapons? No, the colonel said unceremoniously. Devil fruits and weapons are not allowed to be used. This is an assessment of basic abilities, not your combat ability. If you think you can't pass, you can choose to challenge high-level students. Understood. The thin boy nodded in disappointment, walked to the man in black, gritted his teeth, and punched the man in black in the abdomen, with a bang. The man in black said expressionlessly, 20 the 3 forces. Unqualified, distributed to the branch college. The colonel frowned. No, I don't want to go to the branch. I want to challenge her. Hearing the colonel's words, the skinny boy pointed at a petite-looking girl in the 2nd floor team in a panic. Agree to the challenge. The colonel was not surprised, nodded and let the thin man and the petite girl walk onto the ring opposite the playground, but after a few tens of seconds, with a nimble flying kick from the petite girl, the thin boy screamed and flew straight away. Down. The challenge failed. The assessment continues. The colonel turned his head as usual, glanced at the form in his hand, and called out the name of the next person, and the Dow strength assessment continued. In the team, Zhang Yang, who had been watching this scene, suddenly said strangely, 23 Dow forces, haven't they already met the requirements of the 1st floor? Why are they still assigned to the branch? It's too easy for you to think. A 5th floor student standing in front of Zhang Yang heard the words and turned around and said, all the students in the previous class have graduated, so we are the first batch of students in this class, and the one who arrived today is the 2nd batch. 23 Dow strength is indeed the level of the 1st layer, but that guy is the 1st batch of students. According to the regulations of the academy, if the 1st batch of students has not been promoted before the 2nd batch of students arrives, then he will be judged unqualified. Those from the high floors are lowered to the lower floors, and those who cannot be lowered any further will be directly assigned to the branch colleges. Quote. Is there such a rule? Zhang Yang was suddenly surprised. Does this mean that all floor students must be promoted within 1 year? Otherwise it will be demoted or even kicked out of here. This seems a bit too harsh, doesn't it? Even if they are the best among their peers, there must be many people who can't do it. Of course you don't know that you are busy exercising all day. Behind Zhang Yang, Bastille rolled his eyes and said, we have to persist in the survival of the fittest for 6 years. If we don't get eliminated after 6 years, then we will be considered true graduates. Every year we are kicked out of our colleges like this. Someone is there. This competition is really fierce. Zhang Yang nodded his head with a vague understanding. In the past, he thought that Marine Academy was a bit unreal, just learning and exercising every day. Exaggeration. If you don't make progress, you will be eliminated. After 6 years, those who successfully graduate are definitely geniuses among geniuses. As a military force under the world government, it seems that Marine can rule and manage the sea for 800 years is not unreasonable. Zhang Yang was secretly amazed in his heart, and the Dao strength assessment was also going on. Those who pass the assessment are naturally happy, and those who do not pass are basically required to be challenged, but in the end, there are not many successful challenges. After all, the challenge can only challenge one floor higher, and the basic abilities are surpassed. It is not easy to win. During this period, Zhang Yang also clarified the range of Dao power on each floor. The first layer is probably under 30 Dao forces, the second layer is between 30 and 60 Dao forces, the third layer is between 60 and 90 Dao forces, is 90 to 120 Dao power. As for the fifth layer, there are at least 150 Dao strength. Of course, if there is any devil fruit ability, it can also be added depending on the practicality. Carlos. At this time, as Colonel Marine called out another name, a burly boy walked out from the queue of students on the 4th floor, but before Colonel Marine could speak, the boy named Carlos pointed to the middle of the team. Yang, his eyes provocative, said, "Instructor, I choose to challenge, the challenge object is him." Him. Hearing this, Colonel Marine turned his head to look. When he saw Zhang Yang in the crowd, an indescribable strange expression appeared on his face. He looked back at Carlos and said in a strange tone, "Are you sure?" "Of course." Carlos confirmed. At this time, Zhang Yang also reacted, feeling that countless eyes were gathered on him. He was stunned for a while, and then a very evil smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Looks like I've been underestimated." Chapter 23 Carlos killed in seconds. Carlos is excited now. Very, very excited. As a gifted young man who was born with divine power and could enter the 4th floor of the Marine Academy as soon as he passed the test, he always believed that he was the son of the gods chosen by the gods. Otherwise, how could he be so lucky to be found by the Marine General and brought to the Marine headquarters? Entering the 4th floor that everyone yearns for without doing anything. All of this is God's arrangement. However, as he entered the Marine student, he seemed to have been discarded by God. He had to learn everything in the daytime. No matter how much he exercised, his strength did not increase much. It has been more than a year now, but his strength has not grown much. At first, Carlos felt very panicked. If he did not pass the Academy's Dao strength assessment, he would be downgraded and even assigned to the branch college. However, when he accidentally discovered that Zhang Yang, who was exercising on the playground all day, was a 5th floor student, Carlos felt that God had chosen him again. The training that Zhang Yang did, he could easily do before he entered Marine Academy. This kind of person turned out to be a 5th floor student, which made him unbelievable, but also made him ecstatic, although he said there is no change in strength, but as long as you defeat this Zhang Yang, can you also be promoted to the 5th floor? Therefore, Carlos was not in a hurry when he saw that the students were downgraded or even assigned to a branch academy when their Dao strength was insufficient. When the instructor called his name, he walked out with a relaxed expression and looked at him. The provocative pointing to Zhang Yang presented a challenge. However, what happened next left him somewhat baffled. Because he found that not only all the students on the 5th floor and Zhang Yang himself, but even those instructors and men in black, and even the aloof Marine Admiral Zephyr who made him look up to him, looked at him a little weird, which made him feel an inexplicable unease. "Instructor, I'm going to challenge him." In order to drive away the unease in his heart, Carlos repeated it again. Hearing this, Colonel Marine glanced at Carlos, then at Zhang Yang, and finally at Zephyr. These instructors know it. Although this Zhang Yang seems to be doing simple physical exercises every day, he is actually a super genius that even Marine Marshal Kong attaches great importance to. To challenge such a genius, isn't that courting death? Therefore, the colonel couldn't make up his mind for a while. Seeing the colonel looking at him, Zephyr hesitated, nodded and said, "Agree to the challenge." Agree to challenge, both sides out. After receiving the instruction, the colonel said without hesitation, and a happy smile appeared on Carlos' face. Although he didn't know why the instructors behaved in such a strange way, the joy of promotion had already overwhelmed his mind. So he didn't think about it at all and walked directly to the ring. As for the students on the 5th floor, as they agreed to the challenge command, everyone looked at Carlos with pity. Hee, that idiot. There's a good show here. Come on Zhang Yang. Tina cheers for you. Tina shouted excitedly while holding her pink fist. Oh, it's not easy for others, don't be too cruel. Bastille patted Zhang Yang's shoulder, shook his head and sighed. Others, including Ain, Smoker, and the future Vice Admiral, also looked at Carlos with an idiot look. In their opinion, Carlos's behavior was unconscious idiot behavior. If you don't die, you won't die, but there are always people in the world who like to die. Zhang Yang shrugged, walked out of the queue with an inexplicable smile on his mouth, and walked towards the ring. As soon as Zhang Yang came out, in the team on the 3rd floor, Hayden and the other students who had been almost scared to pee by Zhang Yang's spiritual pressure suddenly opened their mouths. Hi, Hayden, that guy is not. One of the teenagers looked at Zhang Yang's figure with some fear. Well, it's him. Hayden also nodded with a terrified expression on his face. There was nothing he could do. The feeling of that publicized Reiatsu was so profound that he couldn't forget what he wanted. To even challenge that person, I really don't know whether to live or die. Hayden looked at Carlos, and couldn't help showing a disdainful smile on his face and said to the people around him, "Look at it. That guy will regret it soon." Hayden and the others were talking on this side, while on the other side, Zhang Yang had already walked out of the team and walked towards the ring, while Carlos had already stood on the ring first, looking at Zhang Yang proudly. "Be careful when you start." When passing by Zephyr, Zephyr whispered to Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang smiled, glanced at Zephyr and said, "Am I like the kind of person who doesn't know the importance?" "Don't worry, it's just for fun." After speaking, Zhang Yang tapped his feet directly, his body rose into the air, and he leapt over a distance of more than 10 meters and landed on the ring, which immediately caused a group of low-floor students to exclaim. Most of the people here know Zhang Yang. After all, they exercise on the playground every day and don't go to class, and they are still students on the 5th floor, so it's impossible not to impress. Originally, when they saw that Zhang Yang didn't attend classes at all, they thought that Zhang Yang had no strength at all, but now that Zhang Yang jumped up from the playground and jumped directly from the playground to the opposite ring, they were naturally surprised one by one. Humph, it's just a trick. Carlos was also surprised, and then said disdainfully. The challenge begins. At this time, seeing both of them on the ring, the colonel said. As soon as the colonel's voice fell, Carloston's eyes lit up, looking at Zhang Yang who had not moved. Without any hesitation, when he stepped on his feet, the whole person rushed towards Zhang Yang at a very fast speed, punching without leaving any energy. To the open cheek. I won. A look of excitement flashed in Carlos' eyes, watching his fist get closer to Zhang Yang's cheek, as if he saw the 5th floor beckoning to him. However, before Carlos was happy, he suddenly found that the world was spinning in front of him, and then his back seemed to hit something, and the severe pain made him groan. What's going on? There was a burst of exclamations in his ears, and Carlos realized that he was lying on the ring in an upside-down posture at some point. On the opposite playground, the students were watching with disbelief. What the hell is going on? Carlos crawled up in a daze, feeling the severe pain in his back, completely confused about what just happened. It doesn't seem right to turn your back to the enemy when fighting. A somewhat playful voice came from behind Carlos, and Carlos was shocked, turned his head subconsciously, and suddenly saw a foot gradually enlarge in his eyes. Bang! Carlos's face and the soles of his feet came into intimate contact, and the nosebleeds splashed, and Carlos jumped up directly into the air and fell to the bottom of the ring, motionless, and he actually fainted. Spike. It turned out to be a spike. Just now, what happened? On the playground, almost all the students stared wide-eyed at Zhang Yang, who retracted his feet on the arena. They witnessed the entire battle with their own eyes, but they didn't understand what was going on. Even the fifth-floor students, except for a limited number of people, also looked bewildered. Smoker, did that guy just disappear when he was about to hit Zhang Yang? Tina stared blankly at Zhang Yang in the ring, and asked Smoker strangely. Well, at that moment, he did disappear. Smoker stared at Zhang Yang tightly and nodded sharply. Chapter 24 One Bone. So weak. You thought you could play with me. On the arena, Zhang Yang looked at Carlos, who had fallen into the arena with nosebleeds, and pouted. Then he slapped Heishe little bored, and turned back to the team. However, at this time, most of the people were dumbfounded. They didn't realize what happened just now. They only saw Carlos punching Zhang Yang, then Zhang Yang suddenly disappeared, and then he was stuck. Los fell to the ground inexplicably, and then Zhang Yang suddenly appeared, and then kicked Carlos out. All of this made them dizzy. How did Zhang Yang suddenly disappear? Seeing Zhang Yang returning to the queue, most of the students were shocked. Even the students on the 4th or even 5th floor didn't understand. Is that shaving just now? It seems a little different. This kid has come up with such a bizarre move again. What a terrifying talent. Zephyr naturally knew what happened at that moment, shook his head, and naturally regarded the sudden disappearance of footwork as a move created by Zhang Yang. I really can't find a reason to show such a skill. Continue the assessment. Zephyr said to the colonel, who was a little stunned to the side. The colonel suddenly recovered, and continued to call the next name, and the assessment continued. In the team, Bastille and Tina asked curiously how Zhang Yang did it just now. When the others heard the words, they involuntarily looked over. After all, they are different from the students on the lower floors. They can see that Zhang Yang did not disappear suddenly, but that the speed was too fast. But this also made them very curious. How did Zhang Yang become so fast in an instant? It's nothing, it's just a movement skill, and you'll learn it soon. Zhang Yang smiled and said, Marine Rokushiki, S-Shave and Shunbu are also quite similar. With Tina and the others' talents, they will start learning sooner or later. What I said. It turned out that the teacher taught you. Shit. It's the same person. How can the treatment be so big? Bastille said, immediately dissatisfied. Obviously, he took Shunbu as Zephyr's teacher Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang didn't bother to explain, but Ai Yin frowned. She didn't remember that the teacher had taught this guy such a move. Ai Yin secretly guessed that the Dao strength test was also going on, and after a while, the students on the 5th floor were tested. Smoker. As another name was called out, Smoker came out looking very upset. And before the colonel could speak, he threw a punch. Bang! With a muffled sound, the black-clothed man's eyes moved to Vivi, and then he returned to normal, 173 Dao forces. Not bad. The colonel nodded with satisfaction and drew on the form. Smoker spat in dissatisfaction and returned to the queue. Ain. The colonel continued to shout. Ai Yin walked out with a calm expression on his face. And then he received his fist at his waist and threw a punch. Bang! The man in black was shocked, his expression changed slightly, and he said solemnly, 213 Dao forces. Whoa! As soon as the words fell, there was an uproar among the students. Countless people looked at Ain in shock. After all, although Smoker's results just now surprised them, they were still within the acceptable range. Level, right? However, the shock continued, because after Ain, Bins and the future vice admirals, almost all of them were above 200 Dao power, and none of them failed. This terrifying value made those students on the lower floors truly realize the gap between them. This is not a star and a half gap, and over time, this gap may become larger. Tina, the The colonel was obviously used to this kind of scene, and continued to call out the next name as usual. It's Tina. Watch Tina's performance. Tina clenched her pink fist and said excitedly, then walked out of the queue. After getting ready, she punched the man in black. 169 Dao power, said the man in black with a blank expression. Not bad. Passed. The colonel nodded and drew on the form. That's it. Tina returned to the queue very dissatisfied. The content, 169 Dao strength. I may not be able to achieve it. Zhang Yang glanced at Tina and said. You lie, Tina won't believe it. Tina said in disbelief, that in this year, she has seen many great things about Zhang Yang. I remember one time, she even saw that Zhang Yang just waved his knife, leaving a long dirt ditch on the ground. If it is said that Zhang Yang's Dao strength is not as good as hers, she will not believe it. I don't believe it either. Bastille said as if you don't want to lie to me. Don't believe it. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes. Bastille. At this time, the colonel called Bastille's name. Bastille hurried out, took a deep breath, and punched the man in black. Bang. The black-clothed man was shocked, and his expression changed slightly. 223 Dao forces. Not bad. Passed. The colonel nodded. Not bad. Bastille returned to the queue with satisfaction, patted Zhang Yang's shoulder and said, Look at you, let everyone be surprised. Zhang Yang, Tina cheers for you. Tina also winked at Zhang Yang. The last one, Zhang Yang. At this time, the colonel called out the last name in a strange tone. Immediately, all eyes were on Zhang Yang. After all, the scene where Zhang Yang killed Carlos in seconds was really eye-catching. They wanted to see how much Dao strength Zhang Yang would have. Zephyr also looked over. Obviously, he was also curious about Zhang Yang's Dao strength. And seeing so many eyes focused on him, Zhang Yang suddenly felt Alexander. What he said to Tina just now is true. His Dao strength value is not necessarily comparable to that of Tina. After all, Dao strength is an intuitive reflection of a person's physical combat ability. Exercise, but really not necessarily comparable to these people. It's just that now so many people are looking at him. If he really comes up with 156 Dao power after a while, no matter how thick his face is, he can't hold it. Why don't you try the trick you learned recently? Would it be a bit too much? Zhang Yang thought to himself, walked out of the queue under the watchful eyes of countless people, and came to the man in black. It's time to start. Hit him wherever you want. Colonel Yan Yu said to Zhang Yang in a friendly manner, and at the same time secretly looking forward to it. How much surprise can this super genius bring to him? Hearing this, Zhang Yang gritted his teeth and fought hard. The head can be broken, the blood can flow, and the face cannot be lost. Run out of spiritual power. Run out of spiritual power. So what? How much force can he withstand at most? Zhang Yang suddenly turned his head and asked Zephyr. Hearing this, Zephyr was stunned for a while, and then he couldn't help but have a thought that even he couldn't believe. Looking at Zhang Yang's worried look, he shook his head and shook off the thoughts that should not have been in his mind. Said, Don't worry, he can bear it under 2000 Dao strength. Then I'm relieved. Zhang Yang nodded, then looked at the man in black. His fists were on his waist, and in the eyes of countless doubts, he closed his eyes, then opened them violently. The spiritual pressure in the body increased rapidly. A strong hurricane appeared out of thin air, and began to circle around Zhang Yang, setting off a series of smoke and dust. What's that? Everyone, including Zephyr, looked at this scene with a little surprise, but they didn't notice the shocked eyes of the black man in front of Zhang Yang. The moment Zhang Yang opened his eyes, he felt an extremely oppressive, domineering aura pressing down on him. Although it didn't do him any harm, it made him feel palpitated. And, I don't know if it's an illusion, behind Zhang Yang, he seems to see a sturdy old man who looks like a wild beast, and those eyes full of majesty and aloof stare straight at him. At this time, Zhang Yang suddenly moved, and the fist that was held at the waist quickly struck out, but it gave a strange feeling of being extremely slow, and hit the black-clothed man's abdomen in the eyes of countless eyes. One bone. Zhang Yang's lips moved slightly, and the small sound was unusually transmitted to everyone's ears. Bang! A white air wave spread out from the position where Zhang Yang's fist was in contact with the black-clothed man. The next moment, the black-clothed man's face changed greatly. He only felt a huge force that he could not ignore, and he was caught off guard. Down! The whole person shot out like a cannonball. Chapter 25: The Admirers of Publicity. Boom! With a loud bang echoing in the Marine Academy, the Marine Academy's playground fell into a dead silence. Everyone stared blankly at Zhang Yang in a fisting posture, and then turned to look at one of the guys across the playground. The arena shrouded in smoke and dust all looked stunned. What just happened? That Zhang Yang actually punched the Academy's assessors out. How is this possible? Countless people were shocked, even those examiners, and Zephyr were no exception. Although they knew that Zhang Yang would surprise them, it wasn't like this, right? The man in black, although he didn't have any official rank in Marine, his strength was already extremely close to the level of generals, and he had the power to knock out people close to the level of generals. In this case, they were only in the last session. I have seen 3 of the graduates, and those 3 are the current Marine Vice Admiral Akainu, Kuzan, and Kazaru, the candidates for Admiral in the future. Could it be that it took only 1 year for this publicity to reach this level? This kid. Zephyr is Admiral after all. Although he was shocked by Zhang Yang's strength, he quickly recovered, looking at Zhang Yang, who retracted his fist and muttered, "Have you grown to this level in a year? Look, come on, I underestimate him a little." At this time, the smoke and dust from the arena opposite the playground also dissipated, and on the arena that had been knocked out of countless cracks, the man in black walked back, rubbing his abdomen, and he could see that the punch he had just raised made him uncomfortable. How much power? Seeing the man in black walking back, the colonel also came back to his senses and hurriedly asked. The black-clothed man glanced at Zhang Yang, who was also looking at him. A trace of shock flashed in his eyes, and after a pause, a slightly uneasy voice spread throughout the audience. 892 Dao power. Whoa! As soon as the black-clothed man's voice fell, there was an uproar in the audience, and everyone looked at Zhang Yang in disbelief. 892 Dao power. Is this really the strength that students who have only been in school for more than a year should have? You must know that the highest one on the 5th floor just now only has more than 230 Dao strength. Then am I qualified? Zhang Yang shook his fist and looked at the colonel. Qualified. Of course qualified. The colonel nodded quickly and said, joking, nearly 900 Dao forces are not qualified. Isn't that an international joke? Since I'm qualified, I'll go back first. Zhang Yang said this to Zephyr. Zephyr nodded, and Zhang Yang turned around and walked towards the dormitory area. Along the way, countless people stared at Zhang Yang with admiration or shock. Liar, you're not as good as me. In the queue, looking at Zhang Yang, who was being watched like a star holding the moon, Tina couldn't help but muttered, and when she looked at Zhang Yang's eyes, a little bit of unknown affection began to emerge. Strong men, especially at their age, are most attracted to them. However, it was obvious that it was not only girls who were attracted by Zhang Yang. In the 3rd floor student queue, Hayden stared blankly at the back of Zhang Yang leaving, his eyes full of madness. Handsome, so handsome, this is the person worthy of my follow. While muttering to himself, Hayden clenched his fists and made a decision in his heart. On the other side, Zhang Yang, who has left everyone's sight. You have to live and suffer to save face. Zhang Yang leaned against the wall with some weak legs, and shook his head with a wry smile. One bone, as the most powerful move in Captain Bai's hit, it goes without saying that it is powerful. If it is used by the captain himself, I am afraid that even a mountain can easily collapse. Even if it is used by the current Zhang Yang, it is nearly the power of 900 Dao Li. However, this kind of powerful move, how could Zhang Yang be able to do it now? Although he played so much power, the result was that his spiritual pressure was almost completely exhausted, and he almost had a problem with walking. If it weren't for the hot-headedness and want to pretend to be forceful today, Jongyang wouldn't use this kind of move at all. After all, to a certain extent, this can be said to be his current bottom-of-the-box trick. But that feeling just now seems to be quite cool. Thinking of how he was being watched by so many people just now, Jongyang couldn't help grinning. He put his body aside and said that he was only in his 20s. It felt good to be frivolous every now and then. Of course, this kind of thing is enough once, and it will not be necessary in the future. The feeling of excessive consumption of spiritual power is really not very pleasant. Shaking his dizzy head, Jongyang went straight back to the bedroom, sat down on the bed and started to recover his spiritual power. Until... bang! The door was violently kicked open with a kick. Jongyang opened his eyes fiercely, only to see Bastille rushing over and grabbing his collar and exaggeratingly said, "Damn it. You are too perverted, aren't you? 899 12 Dao strength. How on earth did you train? It's 4 times as much as mine. Don't get excited." Jongyang opened the excited Bastille silently, rolled his eyes and said, "You think I'm very relaxed? Didn't you see me resting here for an afternoon? Are you hurt?" Hearing this, Bastille's excited expression suddenly disappeared, and he asked worriedly, "I am not injured, it's just a little overdraft." Jongyang shook his head and said, "Overdraft, that's fine." Bastille breathed a sigh of relief, and then suddenly thought of something, staring at Jongyang with a strange expression. "Then what? You are not the teacher's illegitimate child, are you? You are the illegitimate child." Jongyang had just put on his shoes, and when he heard Bastille's words, he couldn't help but said angrily, "That's strange." Bastille said puzzled, "If you weren't the teacher's illegitimate child, how could he teach you so many powerful moves?" "I can't think of it myself." Jongyang glanced at Bastille, stood up and said, "Don't be poor, I'm a little hungry, let's go eat." After speaking, Jongyang ignored Bastille's reaction and walked out. Cut. Who would believe it if you figured it out yourself? Bastille curled his lips, fully convinced that Jongyang's footwork that suddenly disappeared and the move that just kicked the examiner into the air were taught by Zephyr. The two came to the cafeteria, but just as Jongyang stepped on the door frame, he found that the cafeteria was suddenly silent. Everyone turned to look at him, and then... "It's Jongyang. Jongyang is here. So handsome, even more handsome than what I just saw. He's handsome and strong, I can't do it." The screams of the girls resounded in the cafeteria, and then without knowing who was leading the charge, a group of girls rushed towards Jongyang excitedly. "I rely on." Bastille and Jongyang's eyes suddenly widened, and they looked at each other, without any hesitation, turned around and ran. However, just after running out of the cafeteria, a group of women rushed out from the girls' dormitory. Seeing Jongyang, they rushed over. "Jongyang! Jongyang is here. Catch him. Don't let him run away. Damn it, there is also here." Jongyang scolded suddenly, then looked left and right, grabbed the Bastille, and moved his feet. Instant step. Swish. Jongyang took Bastille into a shadow and disappeared at the entrance of the cafeteria in an instant, leaving only a group of girls shouting the name of Jongyang. Crazy, crazy. These women are crazy. In a small alley in the boys' dormitory area, Bastille and Jongyang were both gasping for breath, as if they had not recovered from their senses. After all, the scene just now was really scary. 1 or 2 women are rushing towards you. I am afraid you will feel that the peach blossoms are coming, and open your arms to welcome, but if it is a large group, then you will feel that the end is coming. Forget it, I'd better go back to the dormitory. Go and cook for me. Jongyang said helplessly. That's the only way to do it. You should seek more happiness for yourself these 2 days. Bastille looked at Jongyang with sympathy, and then walked out of the alley, leaving only Jongyang standing in the alley depressed. This is realistic and can't be dressed up. With a helpless sigh, Jongyang understood the feelings of those stars. Chapter 26 Early Graduation. Alas! It looks like I can only stay in the dormitory these 2 days. Seeing Bastille walking out of the alley, Zhang Yang sighed and walked out as well, except that Bastille was going to make meals for him, and he was going back to the dormitory. After all, judging from the situation just now, if he appeared in front of those female students these few days, he would have to be eaten alive by them. Speaking of which, it's not bad to be worshipped by so many girls, but it's not a good thing when worship is too much. In fact, Zhang Yang did not guess wrong, because in the next few days, those female students would be looking for Zhang Yang all day long in the college. If it wasn't for the school's strict rule that men's and women's dormitories are not allowed to cross the border, I'm afraid those female students would have rushed into the men's dormitory long ago. Find Zhang Yang. It was not until a week later that this situation eased. Although there were still some people looking for publicity, it was not as exaggerated as before. Knowing this, Zhang Yang suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. So I can go out now. Zhang Yang breathed a sigh of relief while eating the meal that Bastille brought for him. Yeah, but I'm still a little reluctant. If you want to go out, it's better to wait for class time. Said here, looking at Zhang Yang's handsome face, he said with some schadenfreude, speaking of which, you really look good. Very handsome, no wonder those female students are looking for you all day long. You said it. Zhang Yang glared at Bastille angrily, and immediately made him shut his mouth. The dormitory suddenly became quiet, only the sound of Zhang Yang eating. Speaking of, Bastille suddenly said in a low mood, with your current strength, it seems that you are almost ready to graduate, right? Hearing this, Vivi made a meal of Zhang Yang's eating action, and then returned to normal. Graduate. Zhang Yang murmured in his heart. Speaking of which, he came here to make his body stronger. According to Zephyr, his physical strength has reached the limit of his current body. If he wants to continue to strengthen, he can only wait for his body to grow and exercise. Now, the way of training Zephyr has already taught Zhang Yang, that is to say, now he has nothing to learn here. In the words of Zephyr and Bastille, he was ready to graduate. It's just, for some reason, looking at Bastille, he has a faint reluctance to give up. This person is one of the few friends in this world. Once they graduate, it means that they will not have any intersection for at least 5 years. I thought that first came to Marine in order to become stronger, and I planned to leave me and go to the sea when I became strong, but I didn't expect that now I would leave a bond in Marine, and, as this year passed, he also suddenly discovered that Marine, who seemed to dislike him in the past, is not so annoying to him now. Why do you ask this all of a sudden? Zhang Yang took a sip of the hot soup and said with a normal expression. I know what you're thinking. Bastille looked at Zhang Yang seriously and said, to be honest, I'm really happy to know you, and I also know that you are definitely not as simple as an ordinary student. Your strength has far surpassed us, and it will only be a waste to continue here. It's your time, Zhang Yang, graduate early. I don't want us to stop you from going. Hearing Bastille's words, Zhang Yang was stunned. He didn't expect that Bastille would say these words. After being stunned for a while, what followed was moving. Stop being narcissistic. I'm planning to graduate a long time ago. Do you think I'll be wasting my time here for you? A smile flashed in his eyes, and Zhang Yang said unceremoniously. Damn it. It's my fault for worrying about you in vain. It turns out that you have already made up your mind. Bastille stared at Zhang Yang immediately. With that said, the two raised their heads and glanced at each other, and then laughed at the same time, smiling happily. After eating, Bastille took the tableware and left, and Zhang Yang sat alone on the bed, rarely cultivating spiritual power. Hey, if it doesn't seem to be an accident, then I can only stay in Marine. Recalling what Bastille said just now, Zhang Yang smiled lightly, rested for a while, walked out of the dormitory area, and came to the playground. It was class time now, so the scene that Zhang Yang was worried about did not appear. Sure enough, it's still comfortable outside. After stretching, Zhang Yang twisted his neck, then moved his body and began to practice white fights. Action like wind, punch like electricity. There was a continuous sound of breaking the air in the air, and every punch and kick of Zhang Yang had a lingering momentum, and the spiritual power in the body also surged, forming a hurricane around it. Bang! As the last foot fell, a stone on the ground was directly smashed by Zhang Yang, and the surrounding hurricane also stopped and disappeared with Zhang Yang's movements. Huh! After stretching his muscles and bones, Zhang Yang exhaled a sigh of relief immediately, then looked left and right, and suddenly found that he seemed to have nothing to do. Hey, should I graduate early? Zhang Yang sighed again. The outside world is very big and wonderful. The endless sea, the fierce sea kings, and various devil fruit abilities and various powerhouses are all attractive to Zhang Yang. With a flash of anticipation in his eyes, Zhang Yang raised his foot and walked towards the teaching building. When they came to the stairs, the man in black who was watching the door became more respectful when they saw Zhang Yang, and quickly opened the elevator for Zhang Yang. When I came to the 5th floor and just stepped out of the elevator, Zhang Yang discovered a very interesting thing. Zephyr seems to be explaining the principles of shaving in marine rokushiki. Zhang Yang walked out of the elevator, but did not go over to disturb them, but leaned aside and listened with interest. Zephyr glanced at Zhang Yang without caring, and continued to explain the details of the shaving. As for the others, since they all turned their backs to hear, no one saw Zhang Yang at all. After listening to it for a while, Zhang Yang soon lost interest in shaving. Although shaving is really good, it is still inferior to shunbu, no matter in terms of speed or other aspects, not to mention, for those who have the memory of the captain. For Zhang Yang, using shunpo is also more beneficial to him. Soon, the shaved explanation was finished. Zephyr walked over to Zhang Yang, and others saw Zhang Yang. Zhang. Seeing Zhang Yang, Tina's face suddenly brightened. She was about to go there, but was stopped by Bastille. What are you doing? Let go of Tina. Tina immediately stared at Bastille with dissatisfaction. Wait a minute, now he has something very important. Bastille grabbed Tina, then looked at Zhang Yang, and murmured, go to Zhang Yang. You must become stronger. Have you considered it? Zephyr walked up to Zhang Yang, as if he knew Zhang Yang's purpose this time, and looked at Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang glanced at Bastille and Tina in the crowd, paused, nodded slowly and said, well, after thinking about it, I want to graduate early. Chapter 27 Against Zephyr. Marine Academy, the 5th floor of the teaching building, in the curious eyes of everyone. After Zhang Yang and Zephyr said something, the two walked into the elevator together and left here. Bastille, why did you hold Tina just now? It's all right now, Zhang Yang is gone again. Seeing Zhang Yang, who hadn't seen him in a week, leave again, Tina stared at Bastille angrily. Have you forgotten what I told you last time? Bastille sighed. What do you mean? Zhang Yang is about to graduate. Tina was shocked, and she said in a vague way. Bastille nodded, looked at Tina who was in a depressed mood, and said solemnly, Tina, you should also understand that it is not a good thing for Zhang Yang to continue to stay here. Tina understands. Tina's eyes were a little sad, but although she knew that Zhang Yang should be let go, why was she so sad in her heart? Looking at Tina's distressed appearance, Bastille sighed helplessly, feeling a little envious. How could Zhang Yang take all the benefits, not to mention her strength, but also make Tina one of the best girls in their academy to hurt him secretly? Ah! I can't help you this brother. Come on by yourself. However, turning his head and looking at Smoker who was staring here, Bastille muttered, even if Zhang Yang leaves, I won't let you take advantage of it. At the same time, on the other side, Zhang Yang and Zephyr have come downstairs. There is one more thing you need to do before you submit your graduation application, but this is my personal request, you can choose to refuse or accept it. Zephyr stopped and looked at Zhang Yangdao beside him. What request? Zhang Yang turned his head and asked strangely. Fight me. Zephyr said lightly, causing Zhang Yang to be stunned for a moment. Would you like to accept it? Zephyr stared into Zhang Yang's eyes, wanting to see if he could see flinch in his eyes. It's just a pity that the flinch didn't see it, but Zephyr saw excitement in Zhang Yang's eyes. Of course I accept. Zhang Yang raised the corner of his mouth and said without hesitation, just in time. He also wanted to know what level of strength he has now reached. You sure didn't disappoint me. Zephyr nodded in appreciation, and then a fierce aura emerged from him, stared at Zhang Yang and said, go and bring your knife. In this battle, any means are allowed, and I will not, there is no mercy. Just to my liking. Zhang Yang was not affected by Zephyr's aura in the slightest, gently moved his feet, and disappeared in front of Zephyr with Shunbu. What a weird footwork. Zephyr sighed, then waited quietly. After a while, with the sound of Vivi breaking the air, Zhang Yang suddenly appeared in front of Zephyr with the broken water. Let's go. Change places. Zephyr glanced at Zhang Yang, then walked out of the academy first, followed by Zhang Yang. The two went around Marine Academy, turned left and right, and a few minutes later, under the leadership of Zephyr, Zhang Yang came to a place similar to the Roman Colosseum, but the difference was that there were no crowds of spectators around, and there was also a place on the field. There were no slaves fighting beasts, and there was nowhere and no one. This is the place where Marine used to screen outstanding Marines in the past, but after the Marine Academy, this place is no longer used. It is just right for us to fight. Zephyr explained to Zhang Yang on the side. Zhang Yang nodded, looked left and right. The place was huge, and it was indeed enough for them to play. Let's get started. The two walked to the center of the arena and stood opposite each other. Zephyr said calmly, and the voice just fell. Boom. A powerful momentum spewed out from Zephyr's body, like a wave of air, rolling towards Zhang Yang, and in it, Zhang Yang felt a very sharp aura. Added haki to the aura. Zhang Yang's face became serious, and then the spiritual pressure in his body spewed out, completely offsetting the momentum that rushed over. Conqueror haki. Sure enough, I figured out how to use it myself, but it's not enough. Zephyr's eyes didn't change in the slightest. He moved his feet and his figure disappeared instantly. Shave. Zhang Yang's pupils shrank. Vivi pulled out the water with his right hand instantly, and waved it to the left without hesitation, and a crescent-shaped white spiritual pressure shot out, making a sharp piercing sound in the air. Sword pressure. Bang. A black fist was directly crushed by the sword. Zephyr's figure instantly appeared on Zhang Yang's right side, and his arms turned into a weird black-like metal. Armament haki armed. The power is too small. Zephyr flicked his arm, and suddenly kicked Zhang Yang with a kick. Rankyaku, Tempest Kick. Swish. A light blue air blade whistled out and shot directly towards Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang's expression was slightly stern, and he moved his feet instantly and left his original position in an instant. With a bang, the gravel splashed, leaving a huge ravine directly on the ground. What a great power! Zhang Yang was surprised for a moment. He cut off the water with a flick of his hand, and another sword shot out at Zephyr, and then his figure moved and disappeared instantly. Little trick. Zephyr snorted softly, and smashed the sword again with a punch, and then, like an unpredictable prophet, he avoided Zhang Yang's slash from behind. Observation haki. Zhang Yang frowned, and the cut-off water was inserted into the ground, using the cut-off as a fulcrum to rise into the air, and kicked Zephyr fiercely, but Zephyr grabbed it with one hand, and then threw it out. Immediately afterwards, Zephyr's foot moved, and the whole person directly caught up with Zhang Yang, who flew out, and punched out. Zhang Yang was startled and blocked the water in front of him. Files. Zephyr's fist hit the broken water and made a dull metal crash. Zhang Yang only felt his hands numb, and the whole person accelerated and flew out, slamming into the wall surrounding the arena. Bang, sound, numerous cracks appeared on the wall. Zhang Yang, is this your strength? Zephyr fell from the sky, kicked Zhang Yang directly. Zhang Yang moved his foot, and stepped on Shunbu to leave the place in an instant. The next moment, the wall was directly kicked by Zephyr, revealing the outside scene. Swish. Zhang Yang instantly appeared dozens of meters away from Zephyr, shook his numb arms, looked at Zephyr, who had turned around, and a dignified look flashed in his eyes. Zephyr's strength is really outrageous. Armament haki makes him almost unable to resist Zephyr's attacks or even break his defenses. Observation haki makes Zhang Yang miss almost all of his attacks. Haki is really a troublesome thing. Find a chance and maybe you can learn it. However, Zhang Yang is not without resistance. If it goes on like this in the afternoon, it will be troublesome to be looked down upon. Teacher, I will be serious next time. Zhang Yang grinned and said, the spiritual pressure in his body no longer gushed out. Suddenly, an extremely heavy and oppressive domineering aura filled the entire arena, and then... boom! A flash of white lightning suddenly exploded from behind Zhang Yang, entwining Zhang Yang to the sky, and as the white lightning exploded, the military uniform on Zhang Yang's back and shoulders was also blown into pieces, and the fist and the water-breaking knife were wrapped in a violent hurricane spread. Instant open. Zhang Yang, who was covered in thunder and lightning, looked at Zephyr, who was a little shocked, and the broken water in his hand pointed directly at Zephyr. Go on, teacher. Chapter 28 changes. Crackle, crackle, crackle. In the arena, the white thunderbolt made an ear-piercing roar. Zhang Yang was covered in white lightning, and the ground beneath his feet continued to disintegrate and collapse under the violent lightning, forming a large pit with a diameter of 2 or 3 meters. The violent shock waves spread out in circles like ripples. This is the power of the devil fruit. Seeing Zhang Yang's sudden change, Zephyr couldn't help but said in shock. Hearing this, Zhang Yang shook his head and said softly, this is a physical skill that I developed myself, not a devil fruit, so teacher. With that said, Zhang Yang flicked the broken water that was entangled by lightning in his hand, and with a bang, a wave of air shot out, leaving a slash directly on the ground. They gotten a lot stronger, it's just a wave. Seeing the slash marks Zhang Yang left on the ground, Zephyr was stunned for a while, and then suddenly showed a smile. In this sea, I have never seen such a kid who surprised me again and again. Don't keep your strength, attack me with all your strength, and let me see your strength. Zephyr laughed loudly, and when he moved, he instantly disappeared from Zhang Yang's eyes, leaving only smoke and dust on the spot, and the speed was more than 1 grade higher than before. As you wish. Zhang Yang also grinned isho, his body wrapped in thunder and lightning slowly floated into the air, and then instantly disappeared into a flash of lightning. In the instant open state, with the power of some ghosts, Shunbu has far surpassed the ordinary Shunbu, and the speed is so fast that it even keeps up with the current Zephyr. Next moment. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of dense metal collisions continued to sound. Zhang Yang and Zephyr turned into 2 rays of light, one black and one white, flying rapidly around the arena. Every time they hit, sparks flew, leaving holes on the ground. Boom. There was a loud noise, and the ground 10 meters in diameter collapsed violently as if it had been hit by a meteorite. Not bad, but... Zephyr crossed his hands to block Zhang Yang's blade, and stared sharply at Zhang Yang, who was holding the knife in both hands. With a sudden force of his hands, he pushed Zhang Yang away directly, and a strong hurricane spread immediately. The strength you showed in the last Dao strength test was more than that, why? Are you still hiding your strength? Zephyr suddenly frowned. Hidden strength. Zhang Yang let out a wry smile while Vivi gasped, Admiral deserves to be Admiral, his strength is really not what he can fight now. Vivi took a few breaths. Zhang Yang's face slowly turned serious, he retracted the broken water back into the scabbard, his right hand was placed on his waist, and the spiritual pressure in his body spurted out. Boom. Cracks appeared on the ground, and the violent hurricane blew the gravel and flew out. Seeing this scene, a smile appeared on Zephyr's face. Let me see how much your power can reach. Looking at Zhang Yang's aura like a rainbow, Zephyr's eyes flashed a ray of light, and the cold haki also spewed out of his body. With a bang, the ground under Zephyr's feet suddenly turned upside down. Zhang Yang shot out. So fast. Zhang Yang's pupils shrank, and the spiritual power in his body madly poured into his right fist, and then slammed it out. One bone. Boom. A loud bang resounded through the sky. Zhang Yang and Zephyr's fists collided like a meteorite. Within a radius of more than 10 meters, the ground collapsed and shattered, countless cracks spread, and powerful air waves spread around, blowing countless gravel and sand. Immediately afterwards, a larger air wave spewed out. Bang! Zhang Yang's figure flew upside down, twisted his body in the air and landed. After rubbing his feet on the ground for more than 10 meters, he landed on one knee and stopped, and the white thunder and lightning wrapped around his body also disappeared. Zephyr stood in the deep pit where he was, shook his arms that were a little numb, and lifted armament haki, looking at Zhang Yang, who landed on one knee, with amazement in his eyes. Your strength is enough to go to the sea after graduation. Go back and have a good rest. I will apply for graduation for you. Zephyr walked up to Zhang Yang, and after saying this, he turned around and walked towards the marine headquarters. And Zhang Yang raised his head to look at Zephyr's back. A trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Is this the power of Admiral? Zhang Yang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and shook his head with a wry smile. He could feel that Zephyr didn't use all his strength in the battle just now, but even so, he didn't pose any threat to Zephyr with all his strength. This difference in strength is not a star and a half. If the current Zhang Yang has a captain level, no, as long as he has a vice captain level Reiatsu, even if he can't beat Zephyr, he won't be as embarrassed as he is now. It's still too reluctant. To become stronger, I have to become stronger. Zhang Yang clenched his fists and muttered, then stood up with the broken water as a support, walked out of the arena and returned to Marine Academy. It was class time, so no one was there. I'll say goodbye to them later. Looking up at the window on the 5th floor, Zhang Yang sighed and walked to the dormitory. Back in the dormitory, Zhang Yang didn't say a word, just crossed his legs and started to recover his spiritual power. At the same time, he also thought about the battle just now. Through this battle, he deeply understood his own shortcomings. Although the memory of the commander-in-chief gave him the cultivation method of the 4 basic abilities of the god of death, he was still too weak and could not exert his due power at all. The power of Zongquan and walking ghosts is not enough, and the Zanpakuto can't be taken out. After all, for most of the gods of death, Zongquan and walking ghosts are only auxiliary functions. The real power of the gods of death is the Zanpakuto. The blade is like fire. When will you show up? While recovering his spiritual power, Zhang Yang sank his consciousness into his mind, and sighed as he looked at the flowing blade that was floating quietly. Suddenly, just as Zhang Yang sighed when he would be able to take out Lu Ren Ruo Huo, a hot breath began to radiate from Lu Ren Ruo Huo. Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, then a look of ecstasy flashed across his face. After being silent for more than a year, there is finally a change. Chapter 29 Captain's Last Wish. For Zhang Yang, crossing this sea of strong men like forests, the biggest reliance that made him never fear and uneasy is not the 4 basic skills of death, killing fists and walking ghosts, nor the memory of the captain's life, but the captain's the strongest and oldest Zanpakuto held by the flame element. The blade is like fire. Shikai alone is powerful, and Bankai is almost unmatched. If he can possess the power of this knife, even in the extremely dangerous world of One Piece, King of Pirates, Zhang Yang has absolute confidence to face any situation. However, his strength is not enough. There is simply not enough spiritual power to hold the fire. Even if he has been practicing day and night every day for more than a year, it is still not enough. And now, for the first time, Lu Ren Ruohuo, who has not had any movement for more than a year, has changed for the first time. You can imagine Zhang Yang's mood. He couldn't even care about recovering his spiritual power, and all of Zhang Yang's mind sank into the sea of consciousness, staring closely at Lu Jian Ruohuo, which was slowly exuding a scorching aura. Are you coming out? Or something else? Staring closely at the quietly floating Liuren Ruohuo, Zhang Yang murmured nervously in his heart. As time passed, the hot aura emanating from Liuren Ruohuo became more and more intense, and even faint red airwaves could be seen around the blade. Suddenly, the red airwave distorted. Zhang Yang's spirit was shocked, and he stared at Lu Jian Ruohuo, for fear of missing any details. The red airwaves twisted and gathered, and Liuren Ruohuo was still releasing red heat waves. In Zhang Yang's staring eyes, after a while, the red airwaves slowly formed a human shape. Night Spirit. This was Zhang Yang's first reaction, but he soon knew that he was wrong, because at the same time that Zhang Yang had this idea, the red color of the human-shaped red airwave suddenly faded, and a translucent old man appeared in front of Zhang Yang. He had a hunched figure, a black death tyrant outfit, and a windlass and automatic captain's robe. His face looked extremely old, but there was a cross-shaped scar on his forehead, and his long white beard that hung down to his waist was tied with a purple belt. This is an old grandpa who looks very strict, but seeing this old man, Zhang Yang fell into a sluggishness. Because the old man in front of him is the master of the flames, the captain of the 13th division of the Corpse Soul Realm, the strongest god of death in the millennium, Yamamoto Yuan Lusai Shigekuni. General, Captain, how is this possible? Looking at the existence in front of him that he has seen countless times in anime, Zhang Yang couldn't help but be shocked. In the memory of the captain in his head, the captain should have been killed by Yuhabak. How could it appear in his sea of consciousness? At this time, the commander-in-chief Vivi twisted his neck and looked at the white space around him for a few times. When he saw the flowing blades, Vivi opened his eyes a little, and then looked at the floating in the air. The same is shown in a semi-transparent state. In the sea of consciousness, Zhang Yang himself also exists in this state. Little devil, the identity of the old man, you should have an answer in your mind, right? At this time, the captain looked at Zhang Yang calmly and said in a very old voice. Hearing this, Zhang Yang nodded subconsciously, and said with a bit of soul, Captain, you shouldn't have been given by Yuhabak. How did you appear in my sea of consciousness? Zhang Yang stammered and asked, and at the same time forced himself to calm down slowly. Intuition told him that what happened next might be very important to him. The old man was indeed beheaded by Yuhabak, and now standing in front of you is nothing but a remnant of the old man's soul. The commander-in-chief said calmly, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. When I was dying, the old man knew that he was powerless to return to the sky, but Yuhabak is still in the soul realm, even if there is Team Zero. I still can't worry about the little ghosts in the soul realm, so before they die, I ask Liuren Ruohuo to forcibly open the broken realm and pass on the old man's power, hoping to fight against Yuhabak one day. So, Liuren Ruohuo chose me. Zhang Yang took a deep breath and calmed down. It's not a choice. Liuren Ruohuo just took part of the old man's soul into the broken world, and then fell into a deep sleep in order to save the old man's remnant soul. It was not until just now that he felt a strong spiritual power fluctuation before he woke up. Rode slowly. Zhang Yang nodded his head with a vague understanding. Breaking the boundary, the time and space in there were already messy, so coming to the world of One Piece King of Pirates is a bit exaggerated, but it is not unacceptable. As for myself, maybe it's just that I just happened to be lucky enough to meet Lu Jian Ruohuo. But, do you want to tell the commander-in-chief that this is no longer the world of the god of death? Looking at the commander-in-chief, Zhang Yang thought to himself. Little devil, the old man is running out of time. The commander-in-chief continued, and then with a random move, the flowing blade Ruohuo, which was floating behind the commander-in-chief, flew into his hands as if being summoned. Liuren Ruohuo has accompanied the old man for more than 2,000 years, burning down countless enemies, but it is a pity that now the old man has to abandon him. The commander-in-chief stroked Liuren Ruohuo and sighed, and then threw it casually. Liuren Ruohuo flew directly towards Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang quickly reached out to catch it, feeling the warm breath and touch, and couldn't help feeling a little excited. After more than a year, he finally got it. The old man has already connected it to your soul. From now on, Liuren Ruohuo will be your Zanpakuto, kid. I hope you can treat him well. The commander-in-chief said with some vicissitudes of life. Hearing this, Zhang Yang hesitated for a while looking at the translucent commander-in-chief, but still opened his mouth and said, "Commander-in-Chief, to tell you the truth, this is not your original world anymore, here. This old man has known for a long time." The commander-in-chief interrupted Zhang Yang and sighed. "I knew it when I woke up from Liuran Ruahuo. The boundary is the turbulent flow of time and space, and it's not surprising to go anywhere, kid," the old man thought. "One thing please. Captain, please speak." Zhang Yang asked without hesitation. If he traveled to the world of pirates, he could reach this level in just 1 year. If there is no captain, it is absolutely impossible, and now the captain has handed over everything to him. To fulfill the last wish for the commander-in-chief, what can't you do? Although I don't know how much time it will take, if it is possible, if you can return to the soul realm, I hope you can stay with the old man to take care of those little ghosts. The captain said in a low voice. "Don't worry, as long as that day comes, I will definitely help you protect the soul world." Zhang Yang said seriously, although he also knew that the possibility of meeting the soul world is almost zero. Breaking the void and traversing the world is not something that can be achieved by pure strength. Even with the strength of the captain, it is impossible to do. "Thank you." The commander-in-chief nodded slightly to Zhang Yang, and then his body began to slowly dissipate, and after a while, he disappeared without a trace in this space. Alas! Seeing this scene, Zhang Yang couldn't help sighing. The commander-in-chief had a brilliant life and almost never failed in his life, but in the end, due to his old age, he was already in the hands of Yuhabak. I have to say, this is really a great pity. Don't worry, Captain, you have helped me so much, and there is only a chance, I will definitely help you fulfill your last wish. Zhang Yang said earnestly to the place where the captain disappeared, then looked at Lu Ren Ruahuo in his hand. A smile that could not be concealed appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he withdrew from the sea of consciousness. Chapter 30 Soaring Strength. Marine Headquarters, Marshal's Office. Ha ha ha, this kid Zhang Yang is really good, he is indeed the man I am optimistic about. Exaggerated laughter came from Garp's mouth. He was sitting on the sofa, holding a large bag of senbei in one hand, and slapped the table with the other, making a huge noise and leaving countless numbers on the table. Crack. "Garp, be quiet for me," Sengoku on the side said helplessly. "It doesn't matter, Garp should be happy, after all, the performance of the little guy is unbelievable." Kong waved his hand and smiled, thinking back to Zephyr's words just now, even he couldn't help but feel a little shocked. In just 1 year, Zhang Yang has been able to progress to such a level that his Dao strength is nearly 900, and he has even learned to control the Conqueror haki. Although the level of Conqueror is not very high, even so, it is very impressive. Incredible. Back then, when the 3 Kuzan graduated, they weren't so exaggerated. Kong to imagine what kind of achievements Zhang Yang will have in the future. Anyway, it's fortunate that Garp found out that this kid brought him back to Marine in time, otherwise as long as this kid has a little chance of becoming a pirate, it would be really troublesome. Thinking of this, Kong couldn't help feeling a little heart palpitations, and even Garp, who usually seemed to give him a headache, seemed a little pleasing to the eye. "So, you're here to apply for Zhang Yang's graduation." Sengoku looked at Zephyr beside him. "Yeah, he's very talented, and I don't have anything to teach him." "As for haki," said, Zephyr looked at Garp and said, "I think you should be more suitable to teach him than me." "No problem, let him graduate. Haki, I can teach him." Garp patted his chest and laughed. With his performance, there is no problem with graduating early, but where should he be arranged? Sengoku pondered. Hearing this, Kong also frowned and nodded, agreeing, this is indeed a problem. Although Zhang Yang's strength is good, but he is still too young and has no experience, it is best to send him to a danger first. In places where sex is not very big, let him develop after he has matured a bit. Of course, let's wait for Zhang Yang to come out and listen to his thoughts. Several others also nodded. The importance of Zhang Yang now can be said to be absolutely great. After all, such a candidate who may become an admiral or even a marshal, it is still necessary to seek his opinion on this matter. Well, I'm going to inform him now. Zephyr stood up and nodded, then turned to go out. It's just that his hand just reached the doorknob, including Kong, Sengoku, and Garp. The faces of the four of them changed. In their observation haki perception, the direction of Marine Academy, an extremely oppressive, heavy breath shot straight into the sky, and was increasing at a very incredible speed. It's publicity. After being stunned for a moment, Zephyr turned his head to look at Kong and the others with a very uneasy tone. This Conqueror haki, which is a little different from the usual Conqueror, he had experienced not long ago, and naturally he would not forget it, but the breath just now didn't have any effect on him, but now, he can feel a touch of pressure. It's light, but it does exist. Is this kid a monster? Zephyr thought in shock. At the same time, just when the four of Kong were shocked by Zhang Yang's change, Marine Academy, the dormitory where Zhang Yang was. Boom. The surging spiritual pressure rammed unscrupulously in the room, as if there was a strong wind in the room, and everything was blown in a mess, flying to the corner of the wall and rolling continuously, and, with the continuous strengthening of the spiritual pressure, it even became it was white visible to the naked eye, leaving fissures on the ground and walls. On the bed, Zhang Yang sat cross-legged, the white spiritual power circling crazily all over his body, and the sheets were already torn to shreds by the turbulent spiritual power. After a while, as Zhang Yang opened his eyes fiercely, the raging spiritual pressure in the room seemed to be summoned, and all contracted back into Zhang Yang's body. Only the mess in the room proved what happened just now. Reiatsu, become so strong. Feeling the different spiritual power in his body from before, Zhang Yang stared blankly at his hands, clenched his fists, and a look of excitement flashed in his eyes. Thanks to the commander-in-chief, his spiritual power has almost reached the level of the vice-captain. Shida, Shunpo, Guido, and Kendo have all been greatly enhanced. If he were to fight Zephyr again now, Zhang Yang would be confident. Even if he loses, it is impossible for Zephyr to win so easily. And swish. When he stretched out his hand, a large sword with the handle of Dongfa Shozi appeared in his hand. It's finally here. Seeing this, which made him think about it day and night, finally got into his hands, Zhang Yang couldn't hide his excitement. With a razor-sharp edge, he can be regarded as a real god of death, and he is truly qualified to be at the top of this world. Pulling out the blade like fire, Zhang Yang gently stroked the blade. Although he really wanted to see how powerful Shikai was, his reason told him that it was best not to try it casually here. Although he was able to perform Shikai because he knew the name of Ruo Ren Ruo Huo, the original owner of the knife was not him after all. It was the first time that he could control Shikai. I'm afraid the entire Marine Academy will be reduced to ashes. After all, the high temperature of 6,000 degrees is not just for fun. But no matter what, Zhang Yang's strength has undergone earth-shaking changes. Captain, you really helped the boy a lot. Zhang Yang murmured with a sigh, then stood up, his mind moved, and the flowing blade Ruohuo in his hand disappeared in his hand and appeared in his sea of consciousness. This is the biggest difference between him and other gods of death. Other gods of death must carry the Zanpakudo with him, but he can put it in the sea of consciousness and use it whenever he wants. Then, Lu Ren Ruohuo has arrived, it's time to go to the outside world to see. But before that, Zhang Yang muttered to himself, moved his feet, and disappeared in place in an instant. Barely breathing, he came to the top floor of the dormitory, looked at the direction of the teaching building from a distance. A strange look flashed in his eyes, he moved his feet and disappeared again. Chapter 31 The Party Before Parting. What? Zhang Yang is graduating. Marine Academy. A burst of exclamations suddenly sounded. Looking around, almost everyone stood up and looked at Bastille, who had just said these amazing words, in disbelief. Only Ain, Bins, and Smoker, a few people who didn't fit in very well, frowned and didn't react much. I also know that this is unbelievable, but it is indeed a fact. Zhang Yang and the teacher should have discussed this matter just now. Bastille spread his hands helplessly. After Zhang Yang and Zephyr left, he probably guessed that Zhang Yang was going to discuss graduation, so in order to make Zhang Yang's departure not too sudden, after hesitating, he chose to tell the matter in advance. Others, the results were similar to what he expected, and almost everyone was surprised. Tina, is this true? Zhang Yang is really going to graduate? A few people still asked Tina beside him in disbelief. Tina nodded sadly. Seeing this, the others were silent for a while. Since Tina said so, it must not be wrong. Speaking of which, although they were shocked and surprised by Zhang Yang's early graduation, it was not difficult to accept it. After all, they had been with Zhang Yang for a long time and knew very well about Zhang Yang's strength, so it was not impossible for them to graduate early. It's just that people have feelings and have been together for more than a year. Even though they didn't communicate with Zhang Yang as much as Tina and Bastille, they were still a little reluctant to leave Zhang Yang suddenly. But reluctant to give up, they are no longer the kind of little boys who don't know anything. They all understand that for Zhang Yang, graduating early is the most correct choice. Noisy. At this time, the elevator door suddenly opened slowly, and in the eyes of everyone, Zhang Yang slowly walked out of it, looking at the students who were all staring at him, stunned. What's wrong? They're all staring at me. Am I becoming handsome again? Zhang Yang touched his face and smiled. Zhang Yang, I have already told them about your graduation, Bastille said in a low tone. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned again, and he couldn't help feeling a little moved. These people really treat themselves as friends. A strange look flashed in his eyes. Zhang Yang paused, with a speechless expression on his face. He shook his head and said with a smile, Hey. What am I doing? Isn't it just graduation? It's not parting from life or death. We will not be separated after you graduate. Just met again. It was like parting from life and death. I really convinced you guys. Damn, we can't bear you. Seeing Zhang Yang's bashful expression, Bastille couldn't help cursing immediately. The anger that had been suppressed just eased down, and the other people couldn't help showing slight smiles on their faces. Yes, can't we meet again after they graduate? It's not that we can't meet again in the future, so why be so pessimistic? Tina looked up at Zhang Yang, and a smile appeared on her face. Boring. Smoker spat softly, but there was an imperceptible smile in his eyes. Aang, who was on the side, glanced at Smoker, and then continued to discuss Rokushiki's cultivation with Bins. Looking at this scene, Zhang Yang is also Vivi Isho, so, even if it is a good farewell. I propose, let's hold a party for Zhang Yang tonight. It's on the playground. At this moment, someone suddenly exclaimed excitedly. I agree. Yes, party. Come and celebrate Zhang Yang's early graduation. Great idea. The others immediately agreed. However, what about the food and materials? After being excited, everyone thought of this question, and then all looked at Zhang Yang. Seeing this, Zhang Yang naturally didn't understand what they meant. Helpless, Isho nodded and said, I'll discuss it with the teacher later. Oh. Excited cheers suddenly resounded throughout the floor. So, in the expectation of everyone, the night soon came. Hurry up. Go to the kitchen to find some more firewood. Try to have as many as you can. There must be a bonfire at the party. Is there enough food? Not enough. Go to the kitchen and get it. Get more meat. Hey, who? Don't steal it. The quiet and dark playground in the past was extremely lively tonight, with bonfires burning slowly. Almost the entire Marine Academy students and even instructors all over the playground, shouting and laughter were endless. As for why there are so many people, it's very simple. Zhang Yang asked Zephyr to provide the materials for the party. Naturally, he needs to help arrange the venue. In this way, some students from other floors have joined in, and the news of the party will be held for Zhang Yang's early graduation. As soon as it came out, other people would definitely not be able to sit still, especially those flamboyant admirers who were screaming to join. In short, in the end, it developed into this unknowingly, and the entire Marine Academy is celebrating Zhang Yang's early graduation. It should be said that it is not the illegitimate child of the teacher. In order to send you off, I have created such a big scene. Who believes it is not? Under the big tree next to the playground where Zhang Yang often rests, Bastille looked at the lively playground, glanced at Zhang Yang and hummed. This is going to be heard by the teacher, you have to peel off your skin. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes and said. Cut, teacher is busy holding a party for this bastard right now. I don't have time to come here. Bastille said nonchalantly, but his eyes were looking around, for fear that Zephyr really heard what he said. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was about to say something, but suddenly found a group of girls rushing over. Ah, it's Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang is here. The girls screamed and surrounded Zhang Yang. Before Zhang Yang understood what was going on, in a daze, Zhang Yang was taken away from here, leaving only the stunned Bastille. Damn, this guy is so good. Bastille said a bit sour, and then walked into the crowd. And Zhang Yang, who was pulled into the crowd, was first pulled by the group of girls to eat a lot of food, and then lined up to dance one by one. In short, there was basically no time to rest. After all, who made him the protagonist of the party? It wasn't until several hours later, when it was late at night, that Zhang Yang was released from the hands of the group of women. Publicity. Just now, when the women were freed from the pile, Zhang Yang wiped his cold sweat speechlessly, and then saw Tina running over from the side. Tina, why didn't you go to dance? Zhang Yang chuckled when he saw Tina. I can't dance. Tina didn't dare to look at Zhang Yang. Her face blushed and hesitated for a while, and suddenly she stretched out her hands hidden behind her, and a pair of sheets-like wrist guards appeared in Zhang Yang's eyes. For you, Tina said in an inaudible voice. Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then smiled and took it. Thanks, it's beautiful. Zhang Yang looked at it and smiled. As long as you like it. Tina blushed, then turned around and fled here like a frightened bunny. Zhang Yang shook his head amusingly, then walked towards Bastille and the others. Singing, dancing, eating, drinking, and having fun, the party lasted for a whole night. It was not until the early hours of the morning that the tired boys and girls and instructors lay directly on the playground and fell asleep. What a great night! Looking at the messy playground and the sleeping people, Zhang Yang raised his head and glanced at the gradually whitening sky in the distance, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Chapter 32 A New Beginning, Major Zhang Yang. The sun jumped out of the gray sea, and a small half-circle of purple-red flames immediately illuminated the dim sky. Behind the bright morning glow, it seemed to stretch an endless blue satin. Marine Headquarters, with the first rays of morning light shining on the word, Marine, on the majestic headquarters city wall, on the avenue from Marine College to the headquarters city tower, a slender figure walked slowly. Come slowly. It was a young man who looked 13 or 14 years old, wearing a neat and tidy white marine suit. Although he was not that strong, his strong-looking body swayed as he walked, and he was holding a very delicate hand. With a long knife on his handsome face, there was an inexplicable smile on his face, his dark eyes looked around curiously, and a black strand of hair swayed with Morrowind Vivi. This is a sailor boy who can't help but impress at a glance. And his identity is Zhang Yang, who officially graduated from Marine Academy today. It seems that nothing has changed. While looking at the various scenes of Marin Vando curiously, Zhang Yang kept walking towards the Marine headquarters. Speaking of which, although it has been more than a year since first came to Marine Vando, I have been addicted to training in the past year, and I have hardly been out of the Marine Academy. So far, Zhang Yang's understanding of the Marine headquarters has only stopped for 1 year. What I saw when I first came here and the degree of understanding from the anime, it can be said that except for the layout on the surface, I basically didn't understand it. But Zhang Yang doesn't care. Anyway, he has graduated now, and it will take a long time in the future, so he will always be familiar with it. Swish. Suddenly, a sturdy figure suddenly appeared behind Zhang Yang, who was looking around like a teleportation. The huge fist slammed directly at Zhang Yang, who seemed to know nothing, and it was about to hit Zhang Yang's head. Swish. Zhang Yang's figure disappeared instantly, and his huge fist slammed into the air. The sturdy figure was stunned for a moment, and then a punch slammed behind him. Boom. The end of the scabbard slammed into the huge fist, and the seemingly incomparably fragile scabbard burst out with unbelievably powerful strength. With the loud explosion, a powerful shock wave spread out. The powerful force caused countless cracks to appear even on the hard ground, spreading out all around. Bang! Zhang Yang took a few steps back as usual, shook his numb arm, put the broken water back in his hand, glanced at the sturdy figure in front of him and said unhappily, "Old man, I haven't seen you for a year, this is how you greet me. Way. Ha ha ha, isn't this to try your skills? Not bad, not bad, much better than that kid Kuzan." The sturdy figure laughed loudly, and his identity was clearly visible in the gradually brightening sunlight. Marine Headquarters Vice Admiral, legendary hero, Monkey D. Garp. Hearing this, Zhang Yang couldn't help but twitch at the corners of his mouth, resisting the urge to rush up and kick a few feet, and said angrily, "Then take me to see the marshal." Don't worry, let's go now." Garp smiled nonchalantly, then turned around and walked towards Marine Headquarters. Seeing this, Zhang Yang also followed. "Go to see Kong," this is what Zephyr told him before leaving Marine Academy. "It seems that the graduates have to meet the marshal once, and then the marshal will arrange where to go after the military rank or something. It would be fun to arrange me to the new world, but it seems that there are no 4 emperors yet." Following behind Garp, Zhang Yang thought to himself. After a while, Zhang Yang came to the marshal's office again, and inside, Kong and Sengoku seemed to be talking. As for Zephyr, since he was still teaching students in the academy, he was not present this time. "Marshal Kong, Sengoku Admiral." Zhang Yang said hello to Kong and Garp, but he didn't salute like ordinary sea soldiers, but Kong and Sengoku didn't care. After all, special people must have special treatment. "Sit down," Kong chuckled. Zhang Yang nodded and sat down on the sofa beside Garp. "It's been almost a year since you came here, right?" Kong looked at Zhang Yang's face as usual, nodded secretly for Zhang Yang's heart, and smiled. "Yes, it's been almost 1 year and 3 months. Zhang Yang nodded. "You've really improved a lot this year," Kong said in a tone of unabashed admiration. "Since the establishment of Marine Academy, you are the most talented I have ever seen, and I am looking forward to your future." Marshal Xie praised. Zhang Yang said modestly, but secretly wondered what Kong was trying to say. "Kong, don't say these polite words, and hurry up and talk about the arrangements for Zhang Yang boy," Garp on the side said impatiently. "Garp," Sengoku suddenly snorted. "Garp. It doesn't matter." Kong shook his hand, then looked at Zhang Yang and said, "If that's the case, let's talk about the arrangement for you." With that said, Kong took out a document from the drawer, flipped through it and said to Zhang Yang, "I remember you said that you were trafficked by human traffickers on an island full of bubbles." "Yes." Zhang Yang froze for a moment, then nodded. "That island is called Sabaody Archipelago." Kong looked at Zhang Yang and said, "It's an archipelago in front of the Red Earth continent, and it's also the only place to go to the New World and the Holy Land Mariajoy." "Marshal, what do you mean?" Zhang Yang raised his brows, and there was some kind of guess in his heart. "I want to be in charge of the marine branch where Sabaody Archipelago is stationed," Kong said seriously. "There is the only way to go to the New World. There are many pirates, but because the marine headquarters is very close to there, the pirates don't dare to be too presumptuous. You just came out of the academy, although your strength is not strong. Poor, but too little experience. There is the best place for you to experience. What do you think?" Hearing this, Zhang Yang pondered for a while. He naturally knew a lot about Sabaody Archipelago from anime. Before Luffy fought Tenryubito, the pirates there did not dare to be too arrogant. Anyway, this time Zhang Yang just wanted to go out and see it. And Zhang Yang is also very interested in Sabaody Archipelago, in charge of the marine branch of Sabaody Archipelago. Seems like a lot of fun. An inexplicable smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Zhang Yang nodded and said, "Since it's what the marshal meant, then I naturally have no objection." "That's good." A faint smile appeared on Kong's face, and then he pushed the document in his hand forward, staring at Zhang Yang with a serious look. Then from now on, you are the head of the Sabaody Archipelago Marine Branch, Zhang Yang. Major. Chapter 33 Haki, S Cultivation Method. When it comes to Marin Bando, basically most people will think of the title of its marine headquarters, and tick it off with the highest combat power, iron walls, absolute justice, etc. However, only the local people of Marin Bando do not. I feel that, for them, Marlin Fando is a way to protect them from war and danger. Marlin Fando, in the northwest of the residential area, on the bustling streets, all kinds of shops are lined up. Men and women dressed in different clothes come and go in an endless stream, and occasionally, a few children will come out from nowhere to chase fighting. There is a harmonious tension everywhere. Zhang Yang walked in the crowd with broken water in his hand, and looked at the surrounding scenes with some curiosity. Although he knew that Malinfando had a residential area for ordinary people, he did not expect it to look like this. Compared with the small villages and islands outside that have been attacked by pirates, this place is simply paradise on earth. Of course, if there is no future top war. Zhang Yang secretly added another sentence in his heart. There are people coming and going on the street, and no one will pay attention to him. At most, some people will be surprised by Zhang Yang's youth. Zhang Yang just walked around aimlessly, occasionally seeing some food and drink. He would also go to buy some to taste. As for where did the money come from? Of course I got it from Garp. Huh. Suddenly, Zhang Yang, who didn't know how to go deny, stopped, looked at a library, froze for a while, and then a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Speaking of which, he doesn't know much about the current situation outside. We are about to go to sea soon, so we can use the library to understand the situation outside. Thinking of doing it, Zhang Yang threw the drink cup into the trash can and walked directly into the library. It doesn't look like much from the outside, but once inside, Zhang Yang found that the library was quite big, and some people were already watching it at this time. Looking around, Zhang Yang found a book on history, picked up a modern history book, sat down and read it. Until noon. Snapped. Gently closing the last book, Zhang Yang exhaled slowly, and an inexplicable smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. After some understanding, he has almost understood the current situation outside. First of all, One Piece King of Pirates Gul D. Roger was executed 3 years ago, that is to say, now is the 3rd year after the opening of the era of the Great Pirates. In order to find the big secret treasure that One Piece King of Pirates said before he died, countless pirates rushed to the sea, and now the outside world is a world of pirates. Secondly, the one that Zhang Yang is more concerned about. At this time, the 4 emperors and Shichibukai have not yet been established, but some of them have already become famous in this sea, causing marine and the world government to be extremely headache. In addition, the contradiction between man and humans is also becoming more and more serious. A large number of mermaids are killed and sold by humans, and they are completely shrouded in the shadow of humans. After that, there are some events that have happened in recent years, such as the Golden Lion escape, the O'Hara incident, etc. In short, this is an era that makes Zhang Yang feel unfamiliar and full of expectations. Although this time period did not have the familiar Straw Hat Pirates in the original work, it was more chaotic than the original work. This chaotic situation was just right for him to show his talents. Sabaody Archipelago. I'm looking forward to it more and more. I wonder if I can meet Rayleigh. Returning the book to the bookshelf, Zhang Yang thought to himself with some anticipation in his heart, then walked out of the library, squinted his eyes and looked up at the dazzling sun in the sky, stretched his waist, and walked towards the marine headquarters. After a while, Zhang Yang returned to marine headquarters. Major Zhang Yang. When several Marines standing in front of the entrance of the headquarters saw Zhang Yang, they immediately saluted Zhang Yang and shouted loudly. I forgot, now I'm also a major. Touching his chin and grinning, Zhang Yang smiled at the Marines, and then walked into the Marine headquarters. Speaking of which, he was shocked when he heard that Kong wanted to give him the rank of major. Colonel, it was only below the price of a general. I thought that when Smoker first appeared, he was only a colonel. He was a major right after he graduated. It seems that Kong and the others really don't pay much attention to Zhang Yang. Back in his room on the third floor, Zhang Yang had just had a sip of tea when there was a knock on the door. Come in. Zhang Yangdong didn't move, he took a sip of tea and continued. Squeak. The door was pushed open, and a man who was familiar to Zhang Yang walked in. Lieutenant Colonel Carlo. Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, and called out the other party's name with some uncertainty. If he remembered correctly, this was Lieutenant Colonel Marine who helped him deliver meals for 5 days. It's me. I didn't expect Major Zhang Yang to remember me. Lieutenant Colonel Carlo smiled and said with a flash of joy in his eyes. He secretly felt that his actions were wise. He graduated from Marine Academy in just 1 year, and he directly became a major of Marine headquarters, such a monster-level character. As long as he can hold his thighs well, he may become a colonel or even a general in the future. Zhang Yang naturally didn't know what Carlo was thinking, put down the teacup, and said strangely, "Is there anything you want to do with me?" "Oh, so it is." Carlo hurriedly put several sets of clothes in his hands on the table in front of Zhang Yang, and said, "This is the uniform of the school officer, the marshal asked me to give it to you, and Garp Vice Admiral asked you to go to the square. Quote. Plaza." Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment. Carlo then realized that Zhang Yang didn't seem to know much about this place, and quickly explained, "It's the open space over the alley." "Oh, I see, I'll go right now." Zhang Yang nodded and stood up. "Then I'll say goodbye first." Seeing this, although Carlo wanted to get in touch with Zhang Yang, he still nodded and stepped back. On the other hand, Zhang Yang walked towards the square with the broken water. Sure enough, before reaching the square, Zhang Yang saw Garp's sturdy figure standing there from a distance. "Old man, what's the matter with me?" Zhang Yang walked over and asked casually, and suddenly the eyes of a team of Marines who just passed by were widened. "How dare you call Garp Vice Admiral old man? Isn't this kid afraid of death?" But soon, Garp's response made them even more unbelievable. "Ha ha, aren't you going to come out tomorrow? I have something to tell you." Garp laughed out loud, then said with a nostalgic expression, "Speaking of which, it's been more than a year since I brought you back." "Oh, time flies so fast. Old man, when did you become so provocative? If you have something to say, I have to leave. I have to pack my things." Zhang Yang glanced at Garp and said impatiently. "You stinky brat, can't you be better at your savior?" Garp suddenly stared at Zhang Yang. "Okay, you say what you say." Zhang Yang buckled his ears and rolled his eyes. Hearing this, Garp nodded with satisfaction, and then said with a serious face, "Your current strength is indeed good, but you must not underestimate this sea. The sea is boundless, and there are countless people who are more powerful than you. Like." As he said that, Garp suddenly smashed Zhang Yang with a punch. Obviously it was an extremely ordinary punch, but Zhang Yang's face changed slightly, and the white lightning on his back exploded instantly. Boom! A loud bang accompanied by thick smoke and white thunder and lightning suddenly sounded in the square, which suddenly shocked countless sailors, looked at the square vigilantly, and lifted the gun in their hands. "Put down the guns." A lazy voice came. "Kuzan Vice Admiral." The sailors suddenly looked at Kuzan who appeared beside them in surprise. "Well, don't be nervous, it's all right, everyone can watch it." Kuzan waved his hand casually, and then looked at the place where the smoke and dust filled the air, where Zhang Yang, who was covered in thunder and lightning, flew out from the smoke and dust. His feet pulled out 2 long trenches on the ground, and then he stopped slowly. Then, the thunder and lightning wrapped around his body slowly disappeared, but his clothes were indeed tattered by the lightning. "Old man, what are you trying to do?" Zhang Yang stood firm and looked at Garp who walked out of the smoke. Garp didn't answer, as if talking to himself. On the sea, Logia's devil fruit is recognized as an invincible fruit, but it is only relative to ordinary people, and for the strong, it is not without methods. Your strength is enough, but you still lack the necessary strength to be a qualified powerhouse. Having said that, Garp raised his head and stared at Zhang Yang, and said seriously, since you are going to come out tomorrow, now, I'll tell you how haki cultivates. Chapter 34 The First Style, Stroke. On the endless sea, with the cool sea breeze blowing, the calm sea suddenly turned up with white waves. Zhang Yang lay lazily on a chair, holding the broken water in his arms. Vivi squinted at the blue sky, quietly enjoying the comfortable sunbathing. This is a marine warship. The hull of a few hundred meters long and tens of meters high is like a giant. The words, marine, and a special mark belonging to marine are printed on the huge white sails. The dark muzzle shines in the sun. With a chilling metallic luster, people can't help but be afraid at first sight. At this time, Zhang Yang was on the plywood. It was the next morning. When everything was ready, Zhang Yang boarded the warship marine prepared for him under the watch of Garp and others, and set foot on the ship heading for Sabaody archipelago. Journey. Passing through the Gate of Justice along the way, and then getting rid of the whirlpool currents, the warships have not really entered the channel to the Sabaody archipelago until now. Navigating the journey is naturally boring, so there is this scene, lying on the chair and sunbathing. Of course, this is just the thoughts of the sailors on board. Is Zhang Yang really sunbathing? Obviously, this is impossible. Zhang Yang looks like he is just lying on the chair and basking in the sun, but in fact, he is carefully feeling the atmosphere around him, or in other words, he is trying to learn observation haki. Yesterday afternoon, Garp had already told Zhang Yang about the principles, experience and cultivation methods of observation haki, armament and even conqueror haki, and let him practice hard. In fact, I have been curious about haki Zhang Yang for a long time. Observation haki, which can predict actions in advance and even listen to his voice. Armament haki, which can enhance defense and attack, and is very similar to Reiatsu, can coerce and deter the enemy. The conqueror haki, coupled with the fact that it can attack the body of the devil fruit ability, the practicality of haki is naturally needless to say. Zhang Yang had this idea when he first joined Marine Academy, and he had to learn haki. After all, although his Reiatsu was special, he didn't know if he could attack Logia's devil fruit users, but he was busy exercising later. So I have kept this thing in the back of my mind for a while. And now, since Garp had already told him about haki's cultivation method, how could he sit still? Therefore, almost just after leaving the Marine headquarters, Zhang Yang began to try to practice haki of observation haki. According to Garp, observation haki is the power to feel the surrounding aura, and it can also be said to be the power of listening. No matter what kind of creature, the body will emit a special sound since birth. Judging the position of the creature and the next action, which is the so-called precognition, through practice and use, the range that can be perceived will become larger and larger, and eventually even reach the point of hearing the voice of others. This is observation haki principle. However, it is easier said than done, at least, until now Zhang Yang has not heard that so-called special voice. This haki really isn't that easy to cultivate. Opening his slightly squinted eyes, Zhang Yang looked up at the blue sky, shook his head and sighed, muttering softly. Having said that, this is actually quite normal. In this sea, powerful people may not necessarily know haki, but whoever knows haki is not a strong one. If haki really can learn by simply lying down and feeling it, then there are people who know haki everywhere. Visible. Haki's cultivation is by no means an overnight thing. Even if Zhang Yang has Garp's experience and teachings, it is impossible to learn it so quickly. Zhang Yang also understands this, so he is not in a hurry. As for those with devil fruit ability, even if he really encounters Logia Zhang Yang, he may not be able to deal with it. After all, don't forget that Zhang Yang now has a flaming blade in his body. He sat up, took a sip of the tea on the table beside him, and shouted to a sailor standing beside him, "Hey, how long will it take to get to Sabaody archipelago?" "Report to the major, with the warship." The sailor who was shouted by Zhang Yang saluted, and was about to answer when the entire warship suddenly shook violently, and all the Marines were caught off guard and were suddenly shaken up and down. Boom! The vibration of the warship has not stopped, and a huge wave suddenly rises into the sky next to the warship. In the panic-stricken eyes of the sailors, a huge sea king broke out of the water and bit the warship with its ferocious mouth. Sea kings! It's sea kings! Shoot! Shoot fast! The sea soldier, who was questioned by Zhang Yang just now, shouted in panic. Bang bang bang! For a while, gunshots were heard everywhere, and a total of nearly 100 sailors were shooting at the sea kings frantically, but compared to the huge size of the sea kings, these attacks did not even tickle them. In the eyes of the seamen who were almost desperate, the sea kings continued to pounce on the warship. Seeing, when the sea kings are about to bite the warship. The first stroke. A clear voice suddenly entered the ears of the sailors, and then the sailors found that Zhang Yang had appeared in front of the sea kings at some point, standing on the side of the ship, with his left hand on his waist and his right hand holding it. The handle of the knife stared at the sea kings who were getting closer and closer, and the cloak with the word, "Justice," written on it swayed in the wind. The next moment. A white cold light flashed vertically in front of the sea kings, and time seemed to stand still. The sea kings stopped moving and opened their huge mouths to settle in front of the warship. A few seconds later, in the shocked eyes of the seamen, blood spitting out from the sea kings, the huge sea kings were directly divided into two. Boom! The huge body of the two halves of the sea king lost its center of gravity and fell heavily into the sea, and the huge waves suddenly rose into the sky again. The sailors watching this scene, after being stunned for a moment, uttered a loud shout of excitement, looking at Zhang Yang standing on the side of the ship and closing the knife. His eyes were full of scorching look. Originally, they were still very dissatisfied because they were assigned to work under such a young boy who just graduated, but now, this dissatisfaction suddenly disappeared. The strong are always respected. At this time, Zhang Yang had already retracted the broken water into the scabbard, and carried the broken water over the side of the boat. Zhang Yang walked up to Marine who had been questioned by him before, and asked as usual, "Then, let's continue the topic just now. How long will it take to get to the Sabaody archipelago?" Quote. Chapter 35 Sabaody Archipelago. In fact, for these bottom-level Marines, their idea is very simple, that is, there is a strong and reliable officer. After all, in this world where pirates are prevalent, these 2 points are the most important. At the beginning, when they received the order to become Zhang Yang's subordinate who had just graduated from Marine Academy, although they had heard many rumors about Zhang Yang, when they saw Zhang Yang's youthful appearance and lazy demeanor, they were very concerned about this time. The arrangement is very disappointing. They are the elite Marines of the Marine headquarters. They all hope to be able to kill the enemy heroically under the leadership of a powerful commander. But now, when Zhang Yang easily cut a huge sea king in half in front of them, the views of these seamen on Zhang Yang suddenly changed. Report Major. At the current speed of the warship, it is expected to reach the Sabaody archipelago before dark. When questioned by Zhang Yang, the Navy soldier replied excitedly and loudly, looking at Zhang Yang's eyes full of admiration and reverence. No, it's not just him. The other sea soldiers now look at Zhang Yang with the same respect. The strong will be sought after by people no matter where they are. And feeling the scorching eyes of the sailors, Zhang Yang was a little speechless. Do people in this world like to worship people so much? It's like this in Marine Academy, and it's still like this after coming out. Although it's cool to be admired, but being stared at by a group of big men like this, I always feel a little nervous. Then I'll go back to my room and call me after Sabaody archipelago. Some couldn't stand this kind of gaze. Zhang Yang waved his hand, and then returned to his room without looking back. He took off the cloak behind him and threw it on the bed. Zhang Yang opened the window, looked at the Sea King corpse floating on the sea, and tightened the broken water in his hand, with a smile on his face. The first stroke is the first move in the set of kendo that the captain is most used to. Now he can play some of the power of the captain's kendo. You must know that such a big Sea King, Even an ordinary the officer level officer is also completely unable to deal with it, but Zhang Yang can cut it in two, and the kendo power of the captain can be seen. What's more, this is still made by cutting off the water. If it is used with a flowing blade like fire, with the bonus of flowing blade like fire, the power may be even greater. Sabaody Archipelago, hopefully some awesome guy. Zhang Yang muttered in anticipation, then pulled a seat and sat down. He closed his eyes facing the boundless sea and continued to practice haki. The warship sailed calmly on the sea, approaching the destination Sabaody Archipelago little by little, and before you knew it, night began to fall. Sabaody Archipelago, located in the middle of the Great Waterway, is a very characteristic island in front of the red soil continent. The whole archipelago is formed by a giant tree called mangrove. The ground is the root of the tree, and it will also secrete a very magical resin slime, and then the resin will form bubbles one by one due to air expansion and fly into the sky, build houses on the bubbles, use the bubbles as means of transportation, etc. The bubble culture has been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people here, so here it is again. Named Bubble Island. When night falls, Sabaody Archipelago is a beautiful scene with dim lights. The tops of huge mangrove trees, floating bubbles shine with colorful luster under the lights, coupled with the laughter from the island. Looking at it, I couldn't help but fall in love with it. However, tonight's Sabaody Archipelago seems to be a little different. 42 gr. With the sound of neat footsteps from afar, a large group of Marines rushed in, causing a commotion, and countless people quickly dispersed to both sides of the road, for fear of causing something. Even some of the pirates thought they were coming to catch themselves the moment they saw Marine, and almost ran away, but they soon discovered that this was not the case. Because those Marines didn't even look at them at all, and after they ran to the shore, all the Marines lined up neatly and orderly under the command of a Marine officer, and then stopped moving. This scene suddenly made these people discuss. Hey, what's this for? With such a big battle, wouldn't it be to catch some powerful pirates? A middle-aged man asked suspiciously. I don't think so, said a man next to him, shaking his head. It looks more like he is about to greet someone. Welcome. What kind of big man is that? The middle-aged man suddenly said in surprise. Who knows? It's either an officer in Marine, the world government or Tenryubito. The man on the side guessed. A certain pirate group. Captain, it doesn't look like he's here to catch us, said a crew member with a sigh of relief. Don't be careless, this is most likely Marine's conspiracy. We will catch it all while we relax our vigilance. Tell everyone, if something goes wrong, run away immediately. The bearded captain said vigilantly. Yes. Conversations like this kept ringing in the crowd. Marine, SQ, a middle-aged Marine wearing a cloak of justice listened to the noisy voices in the crowd. His expression didn't change at all, he just stared at the sea in the dark in the distance. However, his heart was not as unshakable as it appeared on the surface. Vosk, this is his name, the rank is Rear Admiral of the Marine Headquarters, the head of the Marine branch of the Sabaody Archipelago, but yesterday afternoon, he received a strange order from the headquarters. Tonight, a major from the Marine Headquarters will come to take over. He manages the Sabaody Archipelago, and his accusation is to help her and protect the Marine Headquarters major named Zhang Yang. This is a bit of a strange order. If it wasn't for sure that the phone bug was Marshal Kong, Vosk would have some doubts who was joking with him. After all, it sounds absurd that Rear Admiral wants to assist the major. But then after calming down, Vosk understood something. Zhang Yang, he has heard of this name even when he is not at the Marine Headquarters. He has heard rumors about the first genius in Marine's history and the future admiral, but he just thought it was a rumor at first. Now it seems that this may be a rumor. Really, how else would he have received such an order? Kong's meaning is very simple, that is, let Zhang Yang experience here, he only needs to tutor from the side. Knowing this, Vosk was not only not dissatisfied or angry, but also a little excited. The future Marine Admiral is going to come here to experience, so can't he be called Admiral's instructor in the future? Therefore, on the second night, although he did not receive an order to meet him, he still took a group of people to meet him without hesitation. Look, what is that? Looks like a ship is coming. At this time, a burst of exclamation disturbed Vosk's thoughts, making him come back to his senses, and quickly looked at the sea, and sure enough, a warship was slowly approaching here. Chapter 36 Vosk Graham Rear Admiral. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Zhang Yang, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, opened his eyes and whispered, "What's the matter?" Report to Major. Sabaody archipelago can already be seen. The reply from the Navy came from outside the door. Hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then turned his head to look at the open window, only to realize that it was already dark outside. Got it. Zhang Yang replied, then got out of bed and put on his shoes. He pushed the door with the broken water in one hand and the other, and the cool sea breeze with a faint fishy smell blew on his face. The cloak behind him swayed with the wind. The searchlights have been turned on the warship, so the deck and the front of the warship can be seen clearly, but the surrounding and further places are pitch black. Zhang Yang walked to the head of the warship and looked around, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. On the sea not far away, a dimly lit island like a dreamland appeared in Zhang Yang's eyes. It was similar to the anime, but it was even more shocking. This is Zhang Yang's destination this time, Sabaody archipelago. It's finally here. Zhang Yang chuckled and said to himself, this will be his first stop in this sea, and everything will start from here. Major, there seems to be something over there. At this moment, a sailor suddenly came over. Something. Zhang Yang looked at the place where the sea soldiers pointed, and suddenly frowned. On the sea not far from the hull, there seems to be some kind of creature floating there. Searchlight, Zhang Yang said with a frown. Yes. Several sailors nodded, and quickly turned the searchlight to the shadow's position. Suddenly, a little girl who looked 8 or 9 years old with short light green hair appeared in the eyes of Zhang Yang and others. The little girl seemed to be taken aback by the light, so she turned around quickly. When she saw Zhang Yang and others on the warship, she suddenly let out an exclamation and dived directly into the water. The amputated fins are clearly visible in the light. Mermaid. It's a mermaid. The sailors exclaimed suddenly, and excitedly ran to the side of the boat to look around. After all, in their identities, they had never seen any characters. They've all returned to their posts, and they're about to land. Zhang Yang gave a light drink, and immediately made all the Marines quickly return to their positions and stand. Seeing this, Zhang Yang nodded with satisfaction, then looked at the sea where the little mermaid disappeared just now. A strange color flashed in his eyes. If he read it right, the mermaid just now should be the merman friend of Luffy and others in the future. Kami too. I just didn't expect to meet her at such a time. I have to say that Kami was quite cute when she was a child. With a smile, Zhang Yang withdrew his gaze, because at this time, the warship was about to dock, and as it got closer and closer to Sabaody archipelago, the scene on the island gradually became clearer. There are various buildings with different shapes on the bubbles flying around, bicycles made of bubbles, plus the crowd in different clothes and the dim lights. It really makes people feel at first glance. People couldn't help but be amazed. But compared to these, Zhang Yang is more concerned about the Marines standing in 2 rows on the coast. Isn't he here to meet me? Zhang Yang thought strangely that although he didn't hate this kind of pomp, but he was always being sought after like this recently, he had a feeling of pretending to be tired. Major, Vosk Rear Admiral, current head of the Marine branch of the Sabaody archipelago, has requested to speak with you. At this time, a sailor came over with a phone bug. Rear Admiral. Zhang Yang was surprised for a moment, glanced at the middle-aged man on the coast who also seemed to be holding a phone bug, and took the phone bug. Is it Major Zhang Yang? A very grand voice came from the phone bug. It's me, Zhang Yang replied. Oh, that's it, the sailors are ready for the welcome ceremony, and the crowd on the coast has been evacuated, please log in now. Voss said in a very polite tone. Oh, okay. Zhang Yang responded, hung up the phone bug, then shook his head helplessly, and just went to the island. As for making so many tunes. But having said that, you still need to log in. Under the gaze of countless ordinary people, even pirates, and marines such as Vossic, the warship slowly docked, and then put down the splint. Zhang Yang walked down first, and after that, the other sailors also walked down in an orderly manner. This scene immediately caused a commotion all around. Although they also guessed that Marine might be welcoming someone, they didn't expect it to be a boy who looked 13 or 14 years old, and they were even more shocked when they saw that the boy was wearing a coat with the word, Justice, written on it. After all, only Marine above ensign can wear this coat. In other words, this boy who looks at most 14 years old is at least an ensign. It really shocked them. Not to mention them, even Vossic was a little shocked. Although he knew that Zhang Yang might not be old, he was too young, right? Colonel at most 14. He hasn't heard of such a thing since he was Marine. However, Rear Admiral is Rear Admiral after all. Although he was shocked by Zhang Yang's age, he quickly regained his senses. Seeing Zhang Yang who had already stepped off the boat, he quickly made a gesture. Welcome to Major Zhang Yang. The sailors who were already ready saluted and shouted. Suddenly, the people around were shocked again. Not ensign, still a major. OMG, how is this possible? Countless eyes looked at Zhang Yang, full of shock and disbelief. Major Zhang Yang, you are welcome. Vosk also quickly stepped forward. Ah, welcome, welcome. Zhang Yang smiled helplessly, feeling that he couldn't stand this kind of situation anymore, so he made a haste and said, go back to the branch first. I'm a little tired. Oh, okay, no problem, I've got the room ready. Vosk nodded quickly, and then gave an order. All the Marines left here in a mighty manner under the leadership of Zhang Yang and Vosk, and walked towards the direction of the Marine branch, leaving only a group of people who had not yet recovered. Chapter 37 Illegal Zone. Hey, have you heard? It seems that a major was sent from the headquarters last night to take over the affairs of Voss, Rear Admiral Sabaody Archipelago. Really or not? Just a major, how could he take over for Voss and Rear Admiral? I don't believe it. Hey, don't believe it, I've heard about it too. Didn't Voss and Rear Admiral take someone out last night? It seems that he picked it up at that time. Cut. Your news is out of date. I have a brother who attended last night's event and he told me all about it. Really? Then tell me, what the hell is going on? I'm telling you. Early in the morning, small whispers sounded in a huge fortress. This is Sabaody Archipelago 63GR, where the Marine branch is stationed. The building like a fortress is surrounded by a high wall. Countless gun muzzles are aimed at the outside. Above and inside the high wall, there are a lot of Marines all the time. Walking around, the defense can be described as a copper wall. And the sound of discussion just now was the sound from a small group of Marines who were patrolling and discussing with nothing to do. As for the object of their discussion, Zhang Yang, who had just arrived at Sabaody Archipelago last night, was the only way to pass the time for these little soldiers who were just patrolling all day. While chatting about gossip, I spent a boring day at the same time. What is that kid doing? How did he get here? While chatting, a sailor suddenly found a young man who looked at most 14 years old, dressed in casual clothes and carrying a knife, walking past them, and immediately treated others. Hearing this, the others also looked over, and when they saw the young man, they were all stunned for a moment. It's really strange, how did this kid come in with a knife? You wait, I'll drive him away. Another sturdy sailor frowned and said as he was about to walk towards the young man. Just before he took 2 steps, he found that the sea soldier who said he knew what happened last night was holding him, looked at the boy with the knife in shock and muttered, "Hold the knife. 13 or 14 years old. It's him, it's him. What are you doing? Let me go, if we are run around by that little devil, we will be in trouble," said the sturdy sea soldier with a frown. Hearing this, the sea soldier who was pulling the sturdy sea soldier suddenly changed his face, and hurriedly said, "Don't go, don't go, if you go, we will be really troublesome." "What do you mean?" the sturdy sea soldier suddenly said strangely, and the other sea soldiers also looked over strangely. Seeing that everyone else was looking at him, the sailor swallowed, looked at the boy who had disappeared around the corner, and said in shock, "That boy just now is the new major." "What?" The others suddenly widened their eyes. Zhang Yang didn't know how much shock he had brought to this group of Marines. At this time, he was wandering around. "It's still comfortable to wear." Pulling the collar, Zhang Yang looked down at his clothes and nodded with satisfaction. What he is wearing now is not the Marine uniform and overcoat he wore before, but a set of casual clothes similar to what ordinary people on Earth wore before. A pair of white trousers, a pair of white short sleeves, very simple dressing up, although it is not as cool as the Marine uniform, but this simple dress makes him feel more intimate and has a feeling of returning to the Earth. Of course, the premise is to ignore the broken water in his hand and the Marine branch he is currently in. As for what Zhang Yang wants to do now, it's very simple. Naturally, he is familiar with this place. After all, it will be his territory in the future. What if he is not familiar with it? Don't even know what his own territory is like then. It really sucks. Walking around, along the way, although many Marines looked at him with curious or doubtful eyes, no one bothered him. Needless to say, although it has only been here for a day, most people should know that he is the new "Here comes the major." Otherwise, letting a stranger like him walk around here can only mean one thing: everyone here should take medicine. After walking around for a while, Zhang Yang almost knew something about this place. The military power here should be very strong in Zhang Yang's view, not to mention the defense facilities such as artillery forts. Just talking about the number of Marines here, Zhang Yang estimates that there are at least 8,900 or even 10,000 people. Plus there are many officers inside. This combat power is definitely very powerful. Naturally, as a branch with a possible 10,000 people, there will be no shortage of facilities here. Although it didn't look very big when I first came in, as soon as I entered it, Zhang Yang knew that there was something special here. Residential area, canteen area, training area, armament area, etc. are all available here. Basically, as long as there should be, there are all here. The equipment is very complete and the layout is very large. Zhang Yang estimated that if he had to walk around here by himself, it might take some time before he would not get lost. For example, now, Zhang Yang doesn't know which area he is in. "Major Zhang Yang, I finally found you." Just when Zhang Yang was thinking about jumping on the building to see where it was, a somewhat relieved voice came over. Zhang Yang turned his head to look, and saw a sailor running towards him. "Who are you?" Zhang Yang looked at him strangely. "Major, I'm Sergeant Zuoli of Marine's headquarters, Vosk Rear Admiral. Please ask me to take you to the office and say that I have something to look for you." The sergeant named Zuoli respectfully said, and did not underestimate him because of his flamboyant appearance. "Oh, lead the way." Zhang Yang nodded and said casually. "Yes." Zuoli nodded quickly, then took Zhang Yang to a tall cylindrical building, went up to the top floor and came to a certain door. Zuoli saluted Zhang Yang and said, "Major, please come in, Rear Admiral is waiting for you inside." Zhang Yang nodded, pushed the door and walked in. In the office, Vasek was arranging something at the desk. When he saw Zhang Yang walking in, he immediately whispered and said, "Major Zhang Yang, you are here." Rear Admiral, is there anything you want me to do?" Zhang Yang asked after nodding his head. "Well, so it is." Vosk nodded, walked to Zhang Yang and handed a large stack of documents to Zhang Yang, saying, "This is the details of our branch, as well as the relevant documents of Sabaody Archipelago. You can take a look first. If there is anything you don't understand you can ask me at any time." Marshal Kong said, "Let me do my best to assist you." Quote. Zhang Yang nodded, flipping through the documents in his hand, and after a while, he had a headache. To be honest, he really doesn't understand these political and military issues, and it's fine for him to fight, but looking at these documents is a headache. That, Voss, Rear Admiral. After hesitating for a while, Zhang Yang put the document on the table, and said tentatively, to be honest, I'm not a commander at all, I'm having a headache looking at these documents and so on, why not? You should be responsible before, if you need to fight, you can inform me again, and I will do my best to help. Hearing this, Voss was stunned for a while, and then he didn't expect Zhang Yang to say this, and suddenly became a little embarrassed. After all, it was Kong's order to let Zhang Yang take over here, and he didn't dare to agree to Zhang Yang's request. Don't worry, I will explain from the marshal's side. Knowing what Voss was worried about, Zhang Yang quickly said. If that's the case, then there's no problem. Voss could only helplessly say. Since Zhang Yang said so, what else could he do? And seeing Voss nodding, Zhang Yang was also relieved. If he really let him command this commander like Kong, with a lot of headaches in front of him all day, then he would really have a headache. That's right. Just as he was about to leave, Zhang Yang suddenly thought of something, turned to Voss and said, is there an illegal zone here? Chapter 38 Link C Paving the Way. The illegal zone refers to the zone where there is no legal control. In Zhang Yang's impression, Sabaody archipelago seems to have this kind of area, but he doesn't remember exactly which area it is. As for why I suddenly thought of asking this, it goes without saying that of course I want to meet the vice captain of the One Piece, King of Pirates, Rayleigh. Now that we are on Sabaody archipelago, it would be a pity not to meet such a character. Voss didn't know that Zhang Yang wanted to see Rayleigh. Hearing Zhang Yang's question, he nodded, took out a map from the drawer, put it on the table, pointed to the map and said, there is indeed a lawless area, this is it, 1/29 gr, these are all areas that Marine cannot manage right now. Quote. An unmanageable area, why? Zhang Yang asked strangely. When he watched anime before, he felt very strange. It was so close to the Marine headquarters, and there were so many Marines stationed here, how could there still be a problem? What about the area under management? This. Hearing this, Voss hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, on the one hand, it's because those areas are too chaotic. Even if they are suppressed once, they will appear in the future. It is impossible for the government to have the energy to invest so many troops in one place. Of course, there are other reasons too. Voss didn't say anything later, but you can probably guess what he meant by looking at the publicity on his face. Needless to say, there must be some big people who need to exist in these areas. For example, Tenryubito, the government defaults to human trafficking and so on. Yes, it is absolutely impossible to say that it has nothing to do with Tenryubito. The evil aristocratic evil taste. Cursing inwardly, Zhang Yang decided that if there is a chance in the future, Tenryubito's waste must be eliminated. The reason why he didn't like Marine in the past was mostly because they indulged Tenryubito's relationship. However, Zhang Yang is not a loyalist of the world government. Although his current position is Marine, he doesn't care what creator Tenryubito is. If there is a day, even in the face of Tenryubito, he will do it without hesitation. Of course, thinking this way, Zhang Yang nodded with a thoughtful look on the surface, and then continued, then Voss, Rear Admiral, please help me connect to Marshal Kong's phone bug, I will contact you with the Marshal explain that you continue to be in charge of things here. Well, okay. Voss nodded and was relieved. The Marshal's order was to let him assist Zhang Yang in managing the Sabaody archipelago, but Zhang Yang was unwilling. Since Zhang Yang could explain it to the Marshal in person, it was naturally the best. So without any hesitation, Voss quickly picked up the phone bug on the table and dialed Kong's phone bug. Hello, this is Marine Headquarters, I'm Marshal Kong. Kong's incomparably majestic voice came from the phone bug. Voss looked at Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang nodded, picked up the microphone and said, Marshal, it's me, Zhang Yang. The voice on the other side of the phone worm paused, and then Kong said in a significantly softer tone, oh, so it's Major Zhang Yang. You should have been to Sabaody archipelago, right? How are you? Are you still used to it? Marshal Xie cares. Everything is still used. Zhang Yang replied. Well, Vasek Rear Admiral will help you manage Sabaody Archipelago. You can ask him if you don't understand anything. You can just let it go. Kong continued. Marshal, that's what I want to tell you. Zhang Yang glanced at Vas, and then continued. Actually, I am not suitable for this kind of management. My idea is that Vas and Rear Admiral continue his work. In the previous job, I changed to assist Vas and Rear Admiral, mainly doing some face-to-face combat work. Do you think it will work? Quote. Hearing that, Kong on the phone worm didn't speak, and seemed to be thinking about something, before he said, it seems that I'm too impatient. Since you don't want to, then don't do it well, you want to be there. Let Vasek Rear Admiral arrange it for you, but Major Zhang Yang, although your strength is good, the pirates who can reach the Sabaody Archipelago are not fuel-efficient lights, so you must be careful. Quote. Understood. Zhang Yang nodded. Well, that's fine, just contact me or Garp directly if you have anything. Do it well, I look forward to your performance. Kong said with a chuckle. It must live up to the high expectations of the Marshal. Zhang Yang also said with a smile. On the side, watching the conversation between Zhang Yang and Kong as if they were friends, Vosker was secretly surprised. It was the first time he had seen Marshal Kong speak to someone in such a tone. It seems that this Major Zhang Yang is more than he imagined. Attention by the headquarters. At this time, Zhang Yang also ended the conversation with Kong. Vas Graham Rear Admiral, then I'll go first. Zhang Yang said to Vas, then turned and left the office. Only Vas looked at Zhang Yang's back and shook his head. It seems that this time a really big person has come. Sighing and muttering, Vasek opened the file on the desk and started his work. On the other side, Zhang Yang, who walked out of the office, went straight to the gate of the station. Major Zhang Yang. When the two seamen at the gate saw Zhang Yang, they hurriedly saluted and shouted that they were one of the seamen who went to pick up Zhang Yang last night. Although Zhang Yang changed his clothes, they recognized him at a glance. Hearing the shouting of the two seamen, the others also quickly looked over. When they saw Zhang Yang, they all started talking in a low voice, and at the same time, they quickly remembered what Zhang Yang looked like. They don't want to cause trouble for not recognizing their superiors and end up being punished. Seeing such abrupt movements of the two Marines, Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then nodded, and walked out without caring, and quickly disappeared in front of the soldiers. Marine branch is located at 63 GR, but in fact, from 60 GR to 69 GR, it is basically the place where Marine and the people of the world government go in and out. Here, it basically belongs to pirates and those criminal organizations are absolutely not dare to approach. Zhang Yang walked towards the illegal land while recalling the map he had just read in the office. Only after walking for a few hours, Zhang Yang walked out of Marine's sphere of influence and came to 71 GR, which belongs to the hotel block. This is too slow. Standing on the street with people coming and going, Zhang Yang frowned and muttered. The place he wants to go is 1 to 29 GR. If he just walks there, I don't know how long it will take. What's more, his purpose this time is to find Rayleigh, and he may not be able to find it between 1 and 29 GR. If he wants to find it elsewhere, it will probably take a lot of time to walk. Originally, he planned to buy a bubble bike, but he didn't bring all the money out of the Marine branch, so Zhang Yang had no choice but to give up the idea. By the way, why did you forget this? Suddenly, the frowning Zhang Yang's eyes lit up, thinking of a perfect solution. As a god of death, although his body is not a spiritual body, he is actually no different from ordinary gods of death except that his physical strength is not comparable to that of a spirit body. Linksy paving the road, that is, using the spiritual child to pave a road, and then let the god of death walk. Using this, the god of death can even walk in the air. Since high-ranking gods of death can do it, how could he not be the captain of the strongest among gods of death? Thinking of this, Zhang Yang can't wait to slap himself in the face. Really, such a high-level ability has been forgotten by himself. Thinking of doing it, Zhang Yang looked left and right, then walked out of the block and came to a small hill where there was no one, and then carefully realized the spirit paving in the memory of the commander-in-chief. After a while, just like an instinct, Zhang Yang stepped lightly under his feet, and the spirits in his body automatically gathered under his feet. The whole person rose into the sky, and flew directly to the top of the red tree, and then the whole person stood in the air without any help at all. The whole picture of the Sabaody archipelago was immediately printed into his eyes. Is this what it feels like to fly? Feeling the wonderful feeling of being in the sky, Zhang Yang looked left and right, grinned isho, moved his feet, and with a bang sound, a white air wave spread out like ripples in the air, and in the right direction of the air wave. In the center, Zhang Yang's whole body shot out like a bullet in an instant. Chapter 39 The Little Pirates. The Little Pirates, a vicious pirate group from West Blue. However, although their pirate group is called the Little Pirates, their scale is not small at all, with more than 200 burly crew members, plus the captain who offered a reward of 40 million Bailey and 23 million Bailey's deputy captain is definitely a small and powerful pirate group. Today is an absolutely lucky day for the Little Pirates, because they have caught a peerless beauty. According to the pamphlets given by the traffickers a few days ago, as long as this woman is sold, they will the most rear admiral can get a fortune of 4 million Baileys. 4 million Baileys is definitely a huge fortune for the Little Pirates. In a good mood, the Little Pirates directly sent people to buy a lot of wine and meat, and held a celebration in the open air. Ha ha ha, brothers, with this money, we can replace all the weapons with the latest models and get more powerful power. The One Piece must be ours. Cheers. Oh. 20 gr. On a spacious lawn, the crew of the Little Pirates sat in groups of 3 and 5, holding up their glasses and laughing wildly. Not far from them, a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 20s was tied to a tree with her mouth closed. She watched the pirates laughing wildly with fear and tears in their beautiful eyes. She knew very well, her next destiny will be if she is sold as a slave, all that awaits her is the endless humiliation that is more painful than death. If she could, she would definitely choose to commit suicide, but these terrifying pirates have stuffed her mouth, making her unable to even commit suicide by biting her tongue. Ha ha, look, this chick is crying. It's so adorable. Captain, can you let me play with this chick first? A pirate noticed the beautiful woman's face with tears streaming down her face. Her eyes flickered, and she licked her mouth and laughed. Bang! With a muffled sound, a large exaggerated axe slammed to the ground, and Oriton, the captain of the Little Pirates, held the handle of the axe in one hand and looked at the pirate with a sneer. If you want to be smashed by me, your head will be smashed. If so, you can try it. Ah, Captain, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. The pirate quickly waved his hands again and said in a panic. Humph. Olton snorted coldly, glanced at the beautiful woman, and sneered. No one is allowed to touch this woman, otherwise she won't be able to sell for a good price. Saying that, Oriton laughed wildly, and took the glass and poured the wine fiercely. Captain Olton, what are we going to do next after selling this woman? On the side, the deputy captain Dicky, who was a little thin and had 2 strange guns on his waist, said. Needless to say, of course I'm going to the New World. That's where I'm on the stage. Oriton said with a grin. New World, then we have to go to Fishman Island first. Dicky nodded, then picked up the wine glass and raised his head to pour it. Then, his eyes suddenly widened, letting the wine pour all over him, staring at the sky in disbelief. There, a figure was flying down from the sky. Ship, Captain, look up. Dichi only had time to shout such a sentence, and with a swoosh, a black shadow suddenly fell from the sky and smashed into the crowd. Boom! With a loud bang, smoke and dust rose into the air, and a powerful shock wave immediately blew the nearby people out, and bursts of panicked screams suddenly sounded, scaring the other pirates to quickly disperse around. What's the matter? The sudden situation suddenly made Olden grab the axe, staring at the place filled with smoke and became alert, and then said to Dichi, who also pulled out a gun. I don't know. I only saw someone rushing down from the sky just now. Captain Olton, could it be a master from Marine? Dick said with a vigilant look. Marine. Olton's face changed suddenly, and then he shouted at those frightened men, everyone is ready to fight. Yes, Captain. Hearing this, the pirates suddenly seemed to have found the backbone, and quickly took out their weapons one by one, and surrounded the place filled with smoke and dust. At this time, a figure just came out of it. White trousers and short sleeves, 13 or 14 years old, handsome face and a delicate long knife in his hand. This person is Zhang Yang. Damn, the speed is too fast, it didn't stop completely. But, it should be 20 gr here, right? While patting the soil on his body, Zhang Yang muttered and raised his head, then he was stunned because he saw the pirates surrounding him. They were also stunned. There was also the little pirate group. They thought it was a powerful enemy this time, but what did they see now? It was just a kid who looked only 13 or 14 years old. It turned out to be a kid. Looking at Zhang Yang, Oriton said with a frown. Captain Olton, don't underestimate this kid, he just flew down from the sky. Dick still looked at Zhang Yang vigilantly. At the same time, being surrounded by people, Zhang Yang also came back to his senses. He glanced at these sturdy men who didn't look like good stubble, and then saw the beautiful man who was tied to a tree and looked at him with a look of help. The woman frowned. Traffickers. Really, it's the first time I came across this kind of thing, should I say it's an illegal zone. Shaking his head helplessly, Zhang Yang ignored the people surrounding him and walked in the direction of the beautiful woman. Little devil, don't move. Seeing Zhang Yang's sudden movement, the pirates who were frightened by Zhang Yang's sudden fall from the sky immediately waved their weapons and threatened. Hearing this, Zhang Yang didn't seem to hear, and continued to walk in the direction of the beautiful woman, raising his right hand casually, his lips moving slightly. The 31 red cannons of breaking the way. Boom! A huge fireball suddenly formed from Zhang Yang's hand, and then shot out, immediately submerging a dozen pirates in it. After a short scream, a dozen charred corpses fell to the ground. Whoa! In an instant, the other pirates hurriedly distanced themselves from Zhang Yang, watching Zhang Yang's non-stop footsteps with fear in his eyes. Devil Fruit Ability. Olton and Dichi suddenly changed their faces, and then Olton shouted without hesitation, "Little ones, retreat! Retreat immediately!" After shouting, Olton and Dick turned their heads and ran away without hesitation. Although their strengths were good, they chose to escape without hesitation in the face of such a devil fruit person who was not easy to mess with. Retreat. Seeing the captain and vice-captain run away, the other pirates froze for a moment, shouted in horror, and hurriedly threw away the weapons in their hands. Zhang Yang glanced at them without chasing them. There are countless such people in the illegal zone. If you really want to solve them one by one, don't be exhausted, not to mention, Zhang Yang is too lazy to chase. Walking in front of the beautiful woman, Zhang Yang then tore off the rope. The beautiful woman immediately knelt in front of Zhang Yang, and Li Hua thanked her with tears. "Thank you, sir, thank you." "Nothing." Zhang Yang quickly shook his head and helped him up, then looked around and said, "Forget it if you are thankful, I still have something to do, let's take you to a safe place first." Speaking, Zhang Yang didn't wait for the beautiful woman to answer, grabbed the other party's willow waist, and rose into the sky with her screams. After a while, he came to the outside of the 30gr market and put it down. Be careful in the future, don't get caught again, especially that kind of beautiful woman. Zhang Yang joked to the beautiful woman, and then stepped on his feet again. The whole person rose to the sky, and disappeared in the eyes of the beautiful woman. After a while, only the beautiful woman was left staring blankly at the sky, and then her face turned slightly red. I touched the willow waist that was embraced by Zhang Yang. Chapter 40 Shaki's ripping off bar. For Zhang Yang, the incident of the little pirates was nothing but an inconspicuous incident. The only thing that impressed him was that the kidnapped girl was pretty. After sending the beauty to a safe area, Zhang Yang continued his search. Relying on Lingxi to pave the way, Rushing on the road is just an easy task for him, and it basically takes no time and effort. The only thing that wastes time and effort is that he has to look around every time he reaches a GR. Just like now, after finding all the positions in 14 GR, Zhang Yang is already feeling a little hungry. It's noon, let's look for the 13th GR. If there is no more, look for it in the afternoon. Standing in the air more than 10 meters out of thin air, looking up at the sun, Zhang Yang rubbed his stomach and muttered to himself, and then the whole person shot out again. After a while, Zhang Yang came to 13 GR. Relying on Link C to pave the way, Zhang Yang flew around all the way, and at the same time, his eyes kept scanning the surroundings to see if there was any goal of his own. I remember there is a saying, you can't find a place to break through the iron shoes, and it takes no effort to get it. Even Zhang Yang felt that he didn't have the target he was looking for here. He inadvertently glanced at a large mound in the distance, his eyes lit up, and he hurried over. It was a building that looked a bit like a bar. It wasn't tall or even a bit old, but as it got closer, Zhang Yang's eyes became brighter and brighter, because he had a hunch that this might be what he was looking for. The goal. Tread. Zhang Yang flew to the front of the building, landed gently on the ground, and then raised his head to look. When he saw the familiar and distinctive signboard, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Shaki, S ripping off bar, finally found. Gently read the font on the sign, Zhang Yang walked over without hesitation. That's right, Shaki, S ripping off bar is the goal of this time. In the original work, Shaki, S ripping off bar is run by Shaki, but Shaki seems to have an inexplicable relationship with Rayleigh, so he occasionally lives here. If he wants to find Rayleigh, Zhang Yang can only think of going to here to find. As for why not feel Rayleigh, S Reiatsu? Quite simply, the entire Sabaody archipelago has so many people that it is simply a whimsical thing to find Rayleigh in so many Reiatsu. After all, although Rayleigh is very strong, his spiritual pressure has nothing to do with strength, so his spiritual pressure is destined to be impossible to have a big gap with ordinary people, and Zhang Yang has never felt Rayleigh's spiritual pressure at all. Where did Rayleigh come from? Therefore, Zhang Yang could only use this brutal method to find it. Although it was time-consuming and laborious, it was fortunate that I found it. Pushing the gate of opening, the layout is similar to that of a general bar, with a curved counter, a variety of wines on the wine rack behind the counter, and clean tables and chairs. Although simple, it makes people feel very comfortable. Oh, here comes a handsome guy, what do you need? Little handsome guy. A somewhat soft but wild voice reached Zhang Yang's ears, who was looking around. Zhang Yang turned his head to look, and saw behind the counter, a beautiful woman with short black hair was lying half-body on the counter, mouth with a cigarette in his mouth. He looked at him with interest. The woman looked to be in her 30s, wearing a black lace dress like a tap dance uniform, and a beautifully crafted going necklace around her neck. Temperament. At the first sight of the woman, Zhang Yang recognized the identity of the other party, Shaki, S ripping off bar, the proprietress, and Rayleigh, S friend. Let's have something to eat. If you're a little hungry, forget about the wine. An inexplicable smile appeared on the corner of Zhang Yang's mouth. He walked directly to the counter, sat down, and said, Little handsome guy, you can't drink at the bar. Shaki stared at Zhang Yang with interest. Then let's have some, Zhang Yang said with a normal expression. Please wait a moment, little handsome boy. Shaki issued lightly, then turned to prepare things, and after a while, a sandwich-like food and a glass of wine were placed in front of Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang was a little hungry for a long time. He put the water cut aside and leaned against the counter. He picked it up and ate it. Little handsome guy, what's your name? Shaki looked at Zhang Yang with a smile. Zhang Yang said while eating. Zhang Yang, what about a rare name? Shaki smiled and tapped the counter with his fingers, looking at Zhang Yang, who was about to finish his sandwich, and took out another one. Thanks. Zhang Yang thanked him, and then continued to eat. Soon, the second sandwich also entered his stomach. He picked up the wine on the side and took a big gulp. Zhang Yang breathed out a sigh of relief. I'm full. Zhang Yang patted his stomach with satisfaction, then looked at Shaki, ready to ask about today's business. Madam Boss, there is something I want to ask you about. Zhang Yang glanced at Shaki and said. What? Talk about it. Shaki smiled while resting his chin on one hand. Actually, I'm looking for someone to help me coat my boat. I heard that you have a very good coating master here. Can you let me meet him? Zhang Yang said expectantly. Master coater, you mean Rayleigh? Shaki spread his hands with a smile and said, I'm sorry, he didn't know where he went a month ago, and he hasn't come back yet. So that's the case. Zhang Yang nodded in disappointment. So little Zhang Yang, I have already answered your question. In fact, I also have a question for you. Shaki smiled, but a fierce aura began to slowly radiate from his body. Can you tell me who you are? As soon as the voice fell, there was a boom, and the counter between Zhang Yang and Shaki burst violently. The wood chips splashed, and one of Shaki's feet that was kicked quickly was held by Zhang Yang's hands, and a powerful hurricane spread, and the wine racks, the wine bottles burst all of a sudden, and the pungent smell of wine all flowed down. You are no ordinary kid. Looking at Zhang Yang, who was blocking his foot, the smile on Shaki's face gradually faded, and he stared at Zhang Yang sharply and said, Who are you? Why do you know that Rayleigh is here? Also, what do you want to do with Rayleigh? 3 questions in a row came out of Shaki's mouth, but Zhang Yang let go of Shaki's feet, stood up, and the seat under the fart suddenly fell apart. Don't be nervous, I didn't mean anything, I just came here purely for personal reasons. Zhang Yang picked up the water cut aside and grinned Isho. As for my identity, you can call me Major Zhang Yang, but don't call me Xiao Zhang Yang, because it's easy to be misunderstood.